This is probably my biggest criticism of the Trump administration. The way in which he's going about doing these deportations is awful. That's why we need to have principles, not just preferences. If our words don't fight, then our swords will. 1 in 3 college students, liberal and conservative, endorse the idea of using physical violence to stop a speaker from speaking. I don't actually think there's going to be a political revolution without a spiritual revolution as well. I lived in Topanga, so spiritual communities are like ayahuasca and bufo and boga and everyone's in the ceremony and to love each other. I love you, everything's perfect. Spirituality is your individual life. Politics is our collective life. There's not a separation between these two things. I wish the political community was more spiritual, and I wish the spiritual community was more political, because they have a lot to learn from each other. We've become pretty hostile to masculinity in this culture. We often talk about toxic masculinity, but we don't talk about toxic femininity. Even taking a masculine stance and saying, no, there's principles, there's objective reality. And we know when we actually have truth, when things are working in objective reality. I see color because I have functioning eyeballs. Race is made up. I'm not saying we can't use it though, because America is also made up. America is an idea. It's an idea that we all buy into. I think America is a useful idea though, because we can actually build something for America. People can opt into the idea of America and grow something. It's generative. Race is a degenerate concept. You can't build things with race. We should never forget slavery. We should never forget how Native Americans were treated. We shouldn't forget any of that. We should never forget how women have been treated historically. But let's not live there. We can't create the future by constantly looking at the past.
So where are we at right now with this whole Epstein saga?
Even if Trump has nothing to hide, the optics are absolutely terrible. I'm gonna get on my little high horse for a second here.
Good to have you here, brother.
Good to be here, man.
So when I see you, to me, you're someone who defies labels. That's Kaizen. Appropriate name for your Instagram handle. That's Kaizen. However, for most of the country and probably the world, you are a Black conservative American. What is that experience like, being seen in that way, kind of being that, but also being someone that actually doesn't fit in any box?
Yeah. It's interesting. We don't get to choose how people view us, right? So before I got into politics, I wasn't someone who thought a lot about politics at all. I wasn't someone who thought about race pretty much at all. People were just people to me. And then when I started speaking out about politics online, it became about, well, you look this way, so you're supposed to have these beliefs. Or, oh, you agree with this person, so that means you're conservative. And at first I kind of resisted it. I was like, wait, no, I'm Kaizen.
That's Kaizen.
Right? And I'm just trying to think, and I'm just trying to get to the truth, just like all of us. But I think when people experience part of you, they have to make a conclusion about all of you in order for it to make sense for them. So at first I resisted all these labels. I was like, what do you mean like Black? Like, what does that actually mean when you say a Black? Like, what is the meaning behind these terms? Does it mean the color of my skin? Does it mean what my belief should be? Does it mean the tribe I'm supposed to agree with? When you say conservative, what does that actually mean? What's the definition of conservative? Am I conservative if I agree with 50% of what Trump is doing, 60%, 10%? And then eventually I just realized it's okay what people call me. I just want people to hear what I'm actually saying. And if it aligns with their expectations of me, that's fine. If it doesn't align, I think that can be useful too. But I just don't really think about it that much. It's not that important to me.
Yeah. I've seen a trend where there are people who, again, recognizing and celebrating the uniqueness and the absurdity of these false binaries that we have, black, white, and then all the other colors in between. And we're trying to always group people into something that makes it easier for us to think. I appreciate that everything is nuanced. And at the same time, I've seen this really strong kind of resurgence in critical thinking, what we would call Black Americans or Americans of, African-American descent, or however you want to frame it. I think, people are largely comfortable with the term Black Americans still, although now we're in a place where it's like, what can we even say or not say? It's so, everything has been so hypersensitized. But I've also seen that there is like a lot of people on the come up who kind of fit this category of divergent thinking from what the normal tribalist expectations would be.
I've seen it too. And I think part of what's going on is, this is a very positive sign. The internet, because it's decentralized, there's no gatekeeping, anyone can have a platform, has allowed a wider range of viewpoints to be brought to the fore. So whereas before it was like, like CNN or New York Times or Fox News would be the people creating our sense of reality, now we get to interact more directly with individuals' viewpoints rather than some sort of media outlets representation of Black people or conservatives or liberals. So as a result, I think you're seeing there's this concept called the Overton window, right? The Overton window is the range of acceptable conversations. The Overton window has been shifted because now you can hear directly from viewpoints like mine that might go against what you would expect someone like me to say. And you can do that directly. There's no gatekeeper needed. And I think that's when people see that, like I have a lot of people in my audience who are Black or African-American, dark skin, whatever you want to call it, who like what I'm saying. And they're like, oh, I'm so glad there's someone who looks like me is saying these things. Because I agree, but I don't feel comfortable saying that within my local community. But online, there's this person out in the world who's saying these things. And what it's allowing people to do is feel like they're part of the community. And when people feel like they're part of a community of people who agree with them, they feel safer to say the things that they think. So yeah, I think there's like an ascendance of individual thinkers. I don't like the term free thinker because it has it's very loaded. It's like, what do you mean? Are other people not free to think?
Right.
But yeah, just more of a diversity of viewpoints. And I don't like to think of myself as someone who's like the truth bringer or someone who has some sort of special access to truth, but just offering a different perspective and a refreshing look at some of the things that we assume to be true.
Well, one of the things I love so much about you is you show your math. We're in a place where a lot of people just say, this is the answer to the equation.
Yeah.
Okay, show your math. And the math is the logic that allowed you to arrive to that conclusion. And what you do is you show your math. You show the logic that allowed you to arrive to the position you're at.
Yeah. And I think just as important, I try to show the math of people who disagree with me too.
Right.
Because they have math too. We can both be logical and arrive at different conclusions even, right? Because you can have the same set of facts, but when you filter it through different sets of values, you're going to arrive at different conclusions as to what to do. But what I'm trying to do in my work when I talk about politics and sensitive issues is just model fairness and intellectual honesty. Because one of the downsides of social media culture is everyone's in algorithmic echo chambers where they're getting their beliefs constantly reinforced to them. And the only time that they hear the opposing viewpoint is where they hear a straw man characterization of it. So what I'm trying to do is show, hey, I don't think that these people are stupid or crazy or imbeciles. I think that they have a different viewpoint. I'm going to try to represent their viewpoint as charitably as I can while also showing my viewpoint. And of course, I think I'm correct. So I'm going to show you why I think that even when we try to reconcile these two strong viewpoints, the one that I'm pushing, I think is more correct than the others. But I'm also open to being proven wrong. Right. And I think that's kind of what America was always supposed to be about. Like the founding fathers enshrined free speech as the First Amendment because we recognize that, hey, we need to have everyone be able to speak in order to get to the truth, not some privileged group who has access to it. And unfortunately, there's the law of free speech and there's the spirit of free speech. And I think the latter is being eroded. And it's not being eroded by people out there. It's being eroded by all of us. Like when we're intolerant to other viewpoints or we demonize people for saying something, or we don't even try to understand the argument that we're hearing from the other side because it's foreign and it's scary, then we create a culture that's intolerant to free speech. We create a culture where if someone disagrees with me and they're on the left, they're a communist. Or if someone disagrees with me and they're on the right, they're a fascist. And we do these gross misrepresentations of views to shut down the conversation before it even starts. So I'm just trying to normalize talking about things that we disagree with. That's it. And one of the most consistent pieces of feedback I get from people when I'm out in public and I run across someone who's seen my work is, I don't agree with everything you say, but I'm glad that you're saying it. I was like, great. It would be weird if you agreed with everything I said. Like, I don't even agree with everything that I said. Like, I'm trying to get to the truth and I'm growing and I update my views as time goes on. So the goal isn't for anyone to be correct. The goal is for us to try to get to what's correct together.
Mm-hmm. I feel like this is something you've touched on, and one of the reasons why I think both of us have immense respect for Charlie Kirk's legacy is that he allowed his ideas to compete in the marketplace.
Yes.
So that we didn't have to compete in other more violent ways.
Yes.
And that is an absolute necessity for how we're going to move forward. We have to allow our ideas to fight in the arena and die so that people don't have to die.
Exactly. It's like if our words don't fight, then our swords will.
Yeah.
And it was interesting when Charlie Kirk was killed. I wasn't very familiar with his work, actually. He was just like the conservative, outspoken guy, clearly very intelligent, but also a bit of a firebrand. That was my perception of him. And it was only after he died and I saw what people were saying about him that I realized, wow, there's actually not just a misunderstanding of a lot of the things he said. There was a misunderstanding of the importance of him saying them, even if you vehemently disagreed. And what's happened, I think, on college campuses in particular, is people have started to equate words themselves with physical violence. So there's this kind of semantic sleight of hand where we say, oh, well, these words are, I hate what you're saying, so I'm going to call it hate speech. I'm going to now say that hate speech is harmful. If something is harmful, it needs to be stopped. The way that you stop harmful things is with physical force. Therefore, someone who's spewing hate speech needs to be put down with physical force. That's kind of the train of logic that is becoming increasingly ascendant on college campuses, by the way, on both sides. So at this point, 1 in 3 college students, liberal and conservative, endorse the idea of using physical violence to stop a speaker from speaking. Like, think about that. 1 in 3 kids has basically followed this. I mean, I think it's an irrational chain of logic, but this chain of logic from words to physical violence. And what that showed me is, wow, we've become so hypersensitized to views that we disagree with that when we hear them, we're so bothered by them that we think it's okay to be physically responsive to them, right, as opposed to just engaging in the marketplace of ideas. And I look at Charlie Kirk and I think to myself, well, who else was even trying? Like, can you name another person from the left or the right who was consistently going to college campuses, the belly of the beast, and being honest and giving other people a chance to speak and share what they thought? Almost no one was doing that. And increasingly in a world where instead of socializing, we have social media, this is an important service that he was providing, regardless of whether you agree with him. So yeah, there's like the more meta value that he was providing of just having actual conversations with people. And then I think there were actually legitimate questions he was asking about things like racial politics in America or gender politics in America that we just actually need to have conversations about. And I think he was just correct about a lot of stuff too.
Yeah.
But there are also things ways in which he spoke that got in the way of his own message. And that's understandable because when someone's on camera for thousands of hours, you're going to find slip-ups. You're going to find mistakes.
Sure.
But in the final analysis, when I actually took the time to review a lot of what he was saying, I was like, oh, wow. Sometimes he put his foot in his mouth a bit. Sometimes he was unnecessarily aggressive. But a lot of the time he was actually...
I would say not even aggressive, more like just smug.
Yeah, a little smug, a little bit of hubris.
Smug,
yeah. And, you know, he was a 31-year-old man who had a ton of success, and that's going to happen sometimes. But we've moved the standard for speech to perfection, where now if you have any slip up whatsoever, or you say something in a way that anyone can get offended by, you're now demonized to an extreme degree. And yeah, people literally celebrate violence.
There's an idea that, you know, I can understand this from like kind of a primitive aspect. So if someone comes directly at you and says something horrible about you, your mother, and your girlfriend, you might say like, all right, I'll meet you outside. We got to settle this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a direct attack on something that's so personal and so violating to who you are in your identity that I could see like, all right, well, let's, you know, go outside and let's settle this, you know, man to man, woman to woman, however it ends up going down. However, that's a far different thing than someone actually criticizing the ideology that you have. But people have fused their identity with their ideology to such a degree that attack on your ideology has become equivalent to like an attack on your very personhood itself.
Yeah.
Or like your family itself, you know? And so the fusion of identity with ideology is at like a crazy level right now.
It is. And I would even challenge what you said about, okay, well, what if someone personally attacked you with words, right? Because let's say you sit here and you start like calling me all sorts of names and say really offensive things about me. There's still a categorical difference between you saying words and you being physically aggressive toward me, right? Even what you just said is like, oh, well, let's take this outside. Well, now we're consenting to being mutually violent toward one another.
Right.
If we're saying, let's take it outside and fight. There's a difference between that and assassinating someone.
For sure.
Right?
For sure.
So the reason I say that is because there's a bright line between words and physical violence that I think has been blurred. And once you kind of cross that line, there's no turning back. Because what you label hate speech, not everyone agrees is hate speech. And what you say might be considered hate speech by someone else. So what's preventing someone who disagrees with you from using physical violence against you? Mm-hmm. So yeah, part of it is I think we just need to draw a really bright line between words and physical force, because words, I always get to choose how I respond to words. Even the most vile words, I get to choose how I respond to. But if you lay hands on me, that's involuntary. Like,
right.
I don't get to opt into that. I have to defend myself.
Right.
But yeah, also a thing that's happening is people are very attached to their ideas. So an attack on their ideas feels like an attack on them. When in reality, it's like, no, maybe your ideas are under threat, but the good news is you're not your ideas. Right?
Hello?
Like, yeah, like your ideas can die without you dying.
Right.
And I will say that, sometimes people will say, okay, well, maybe the ideas aren't, they can be attacked, but if it's like a vulnerable group, right? So people talk about Charlie Kirk's comments about Black people, for example, and you say, well, your words are harmful to a community. Well, there I would say, okay, well, if the words are harmful to a community, then counter them with better words. The solution to free hateful speech is free loving speech. The solution to free false speech is free true speech, but it's always speech. The solution to speech is always speech. And even to the extent that you think what someone's saying is objectively the most hateful, vile thing in the world, well, you don't want to give any individual the power to pass judgment that results in physical punishment. Because when you give anyone that power can be very, very quickly used against you.
Totally.
So I think that's part of what people are not really understanding about, like, why we draw the line at words and we don't call words physical violence. They're two different things.
We are seeing something very interesting happen in the UK, where now hate speech can be labeled as something that's a criminal offense. But hate speech, it's up to the judges, the magistrates to decide whether the origin, and again, this goes into this mind reading fallacy that people have, whether the origin of what you're saying originated from a place of hate and therefore we can justify it.
Yeah.
But once you cross that threshold, whoever is actually holding the power will use that new law and that new legislation to actually do horrible things to the other ideology that they don't agree with.
Yes. I mean, today you're the victor, tomorrow you're the victim. That's why we need to have principles, not just preferences. So, there's a lot of talk about authoritarianism right now in the country and Trump, and we can get into all of that. But I think sometimes a lot of these discussions get very confused because there's not even an agreement on what civil society actually is. Civil society exists so that we resolve disagreements through systems rather than individuals, right? So if you and I have a dispute over property in a state of nature, we would just fight it out and whoever lives wins. In a civil society, we work it out through words and arguments and objectivity. When we have labels like hate speech, that's not objective anymore. It's subjective inherently. It's like, what is hate? Can you touch it? Can you feel it? Can you define it? Would everyone on the planet agree that something is hate speech? Invariably, you're going to find people who disagree. So when we have subjective legal standards like what's happening in the UK of hate speech, it allows tyranny.
Yep.
Because now, rather than having a standard that can be objectively verified, you're saying, well, it can't be objectively verified. We're going to give the ability to verify what's hate speech to an authority, and that authority gets to use that however they want. Now, am I saying that there's not such thing as hatred? Of course there's such a thing as hatred. Like, can you objectively assess it and measure it? No. So we shouldn't be making laws around it. That's why even in America, there's very few situations where free speech rights are curtailed. One of them is using fighting words. So if you use fighting words that are directly inciting violence, it's one of the few cases where you can actually go to prison for speech. But even that, it's very, very hard to meet that standard, to even prove that someone was using fighting words. People have heard of, the idea of like yelling fire in a crowded movie theater or something, right? The reason the founding fathers recognized that we need to be very careful with making certain speech illegal is because it always gets abused. I mean, even under the Trump administration, I'll say this. I remember when there were a bunch of, this is earlier in the year, there were a bunch of protests happening on colleges, campuses about what was going on in Gaza. And the Trump administration started detaining college activists, saying that, they were Hamas sympathizers, pro-terrorist sympathizers, and wanting to deport them. I remember originally feeling like, well, there is like kind of this infiltration of anti-American ideas into America that we actually do need to deal with. But the problem here is when we allow anyone, whether it's Trump or Biden, whoever you agree with, to say, well, that speech is, in this case, terrorist sympathizing, which is a vague standard. Well, today, the person you consider a terrorist might be the person who is disadvantaged by the action, but tomorrow it might be the person who you consider a freedom fighter.
Right.
So we got to be very careful with speech, and we always want to reduce things down to actual physical actions in the real world.
Yeah, that's so wise, and I think even in the first example I gave, I do feel like there is still a place where, in some states in the U.S., there's like mutually agreed combat, where you say to somebody like, look, our words are not going to settle this. We've made offenses to such a degree. We're going to set a time and place, and actually you can alert the authorities.
Yeah.
And they'll just be there. They'll be like hockey refs.
Okay,
you know what I mean? It'll be like you watch a hockey game and they drop the gloves and the refs just kind of skate around and they let people get their get their aggression out and then it's over. And then typically there's a kind of a reconciliation. So I'm not like opposed to that, but then at that point there's no guns, there's no knives, there's no there's a code that exists, and still there's a higher way to do it, y'all. Even if you're offended, can you identify yourself not even with the person and the identity complex that you have, but the pure loving awareness that exists in us, as us, through us, and beyond us, so those words don't even land in a place where you're actually offended in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's getting even closer to the mark. Talking about sin is missing the mark. What's even closer to the mark? That's even closer to the mark, where you're not offended at all. And then you can continue to just either walk away or use your words in a beautiful way. But we are moving further away from that. Yeah. And I think that's this key point that you're making. And that short film that you pointed to on your social media, Seeds of Doubt, that talks about just kind of the radicalization of people and their ideas, and then the fusion of their identity with that tribalist group. So talk a little bit about these kind of concepts of tribalism, because this is something that is a part of kind of the human lineage to be tribal. And it has its benefits because a tribe was really there for each other, but it created an in-group and an out-group. And it really gave permission for you to do pretty much whatever you wanted to the out-group. And we've seen that kind of historically, whether you want to talk about that as violence or slavery or however you want to talk about it. We've seen an in-group who has a certain set of rules for their in-group and a certain set of rules for their out-group.
Yeah. Well, let me actually first speak in defense of tribalism, right? Because tribalism has become kind of a dirty word these days. And for good reason, but let's just talk about like evolutionarily, why does tribalism exist? I think there's units of organization in nature and in society that just allow societies to thrive. So for example, if your first allegiance is to your family, like you say, I'm going to take care of my kids first before I take care of my town, before I take care of my city, before I take care of my state, my country, other countries. I think that just works because someone needs to be taking care of your kids first, and it might as well be you. Then you move outward and you say, okay, well, what's the point of tribalism for your country, for example? Like, why should people care about America, who live in America, versus care about people in China? Because you're more able to locally impact America. You're more affected by what happens in America, and you're more able to influence America. So that's where your responsibility lies, because you have an ability to respond to what's happening in America. Then I think you do have a responsibility to the human species more generally, but it's not as immediate as your responsibility to taking care of your kid. So I don't think tribalism is inherently bad. I think the problem is over-attachment to tribal identity that leads to people dehumanizing people who are outside of the tribe. And that's what you see happening when, there's like ethnic cleansing, for example, where people get so caught up in who your father was and what your ancestry was that you justify killing the other tribe. Or wars between countries, where it's like you have this blood feud over who owned some land. Like, that's kind of what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. And tons of innocent people are being killed over this level of tribalism. And I think if we could recognize the utility of tribes without being more attached to the tribe than our shared tribe as humanity, we could actually be getting somewhere. Because I think it's totally fine for people to, feel connected to their racial group or people who look like them. But it shouldn't be justified to the point where you kill people who are outside of your tribe. It should be closer to like your preference for ice cream. It's like if you're black and you like to be around other black people, that's totally cool. If you're white and you like to be around other white people, it's totally cool. But recognize that people from the other tribe are just as equally human as you. They're just not as necessarily compatible with you because of your tribal preference. It's totally fine. But what instead has happened is I think tribe has replaced truth for a lot of people. Where it's much less important what's actually true, and it's much more important what does everyone around me agree with. And again, it's kind of natural. It's evolutionarily coded because, think about it. In a state of nature, if you lose your tribe, you could lose your life, right? Yep. In like ancient Greece, like if you do something bad enough, you would just get exiled, which is essentially a death sentence. Yep. If you're reliant on individuals. And ironically, we're less reliant on our tribes now than ever because of technology. Like you can pretty much live as an individual person and not be wedded to any tribe and survive. Like you can't really get excommunicated. Like what's the modern equivalent of getting excommunicated? You get canceled on the internet. So what? You can go find new friends.
Right.
But people are acting as if if they lose their tribe, they lose their life.
Sure.
So I think that's part of why we have so much polarization now, where mentally people are very attached to being accepted by this group, even though they don't actually have to be anymore. And it's preventing them from seeing the merits of the other group. And it's led to a lot of self-righteousness where it's like, well, my tribe are the good guys, your tribe are the bad guys, and we just have to win. We have to dominate you. There cannot be peace here. There can't be unity here. Which is sad because I don't think that's true. I think we can easily get along.
One of the things you're pointing to, so there's a great piece of text from a master in the Solomon lineage named Abraham Cook, and he wrote that there are 5 songs that the righteous one sings, and the first song is the song of the self. So you take care of yourself, and in whatever way that is, like your own person. You have to fill your own cup. You have to take care of yourself. Then there's your family, and which then has multiple fractals: family, then kind of tribe, then extending on whatever you consider your kind of closer tribal ethnic identity, which includes family as the inner circle, and then a larger circle of what your belief systems are, maybe your religion, your whatever part of that is, could even be your country. And that's the second song. Then the third song is the song of all humanity. So ultimately, this is being human first. You're singing a song and saying like, all right, we're going to take care of humans, more so than we're going to take care of the, the other animals, but that comes in the fourth song, which is actually global centric. So you're taking care of all of nature, an animistic viewpoint where the oceans are a being Oshun, the mountains are Apus that, represent, great wisdom, and the animals are a part of the thriving ecosystem of the world. And then there's the final song, which is being cosmocentric, which is like, okay, now we need to take care of the whole cosmos and like being, aware of space debris that may affect other, like it's even going beyond that. And that's beyond where most of us are even thinking now. But there's a possibility. It's a not zero chance that we could become part of a cosmic, galactic federation. I don't hold that as like an impossibility. So, and then the king, the real king, the righteous king, is the one for whom they sing all of those songs together in harmony.
Yes.
And so each one is included and transcended in the next level.
Yes.
And like, that's the model I think that people need to understand. It's just a way to kind of frame your thinking that says, it's okay to take care of yourself. It's okay to take care of your family. It's okay to take care of all people. It's okay to take care of our planet. And it's okay to take care of the whole cosmos. And if you do it right, you sing them all in one harmony.
I love that. Yeah. Because yes, this is your more local tribe, but you're part of a bigger tribe too.
Yes.
Right. So you don't want, like, if you're being driven to violence against another tribe, they're not actually part of a different tribe. They're part of the same tribe, just maybe not as close as the tribe that you're fighting against. You're fighting against them with.
Yes.
And yeah, I love that idea of this is just like a natural ordering to things. But I think people kind of like, they stop at one level. It's like, okay, well, no, my tribe is the Democrats. My tribe is the Republicans. And if you're a Democrat, those Republicans, nothing in common with them. Or if you're a Republican, those Democrats, nothing in common with them. We can't have unity with these people. And yeah, I think we could just have a more expanded sense of identity. I think identity is really important. I think we just have very limited senses of identity.
I've always been a collector since I was a kid. Whether it was sports cards, magic cards, comics, stamps, or coins. And as I've gotten older, I've transitioned to collecting original art. I also believe in precious metals as one of the safest and most stable stores of wealth. The impossibly cool thing about my new company, Metalmark, as part of the Aubrey Marcus Collective, is that it combines both of these things that I love. Fully assayable and recoverable fractional gold notes paired with impossibly beautiful, cool, and collectible limited edition art. So if for some reason you don't like the art anymore or the art loses its value, you can always just keep the gold. If any other class of art loses its value, all you are left with is paper, or in the case of NFTs, pixels. And if you are just starting in collecting gold, instead of having to drop $2,700 on a coin like this, you can get in for less than a Benjamin. And then on the other side, you start to dehumanize the people who are on the other side. And this was one of the things I was the most outspoken about during the pandemic, is there was so much tribalism. You were either a fascist, domestic terrorist if you didn't agree with the pandemic policies, or the kind of forcefulness by which that experimental, vaccine was being pushed out into the world. If you disagreed with that, you were all of these bad names: conspiracy theorists, domestic terrorists, all sorts of different things. The truckers in Canada were Nazi fascists because they were protesting these things. And then on the other side, everybody's like, you can't call us those things. And everybody there, they're all sheep. I'm like, you can't call people sheep, everybody. Like, stop. Everybody stop. Like, this has been used in every war. You've called people cockroaches, you've called people sheep, you've called people all kinds of things. It's the literal definition of dehumanization. Yeah. And as soon as someone is dehumanized, you can justify all sorts of things.
Yeah. And that's why I think we have all these political conversations, and like, this is a new controversy. It's like 3 times a day at this rate. And I hope people are starting to notice that the controversies are never ending, and we don't even resolve one issue before we move on to the next one. So the what changes every day, but the how is consistent. And if the how is constant dehumanization and straw manning people and calling people names and insulting those who disagree with us and demonizing everyone who's not in our tribe, then no matter what the issue is, whether it's the economy or immigration or some foreign war, we're not going to have the right processes to resolve any of our problems. So the what matters, of course, but the how really matters.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it feels like, my audience is like majority conservative, and I recognize that. And sometimes I'll just point out, it's like, hey, like I agree with a lot of the things that Trump is trying to do, but can we like just say things more kindly and in a less inflammatory way? Because the how you accomplish things impacts your ability to accomplish the what. So for example, obviously one of the big things that's going on is the illegal immigration deportations, right? And the ICE raids and stuff, right? And I've said this elsewhere, I'm in support of deporting everyone who's in the country illegally. And we can talk about the principled reasons why, but I just don't think you can have a functional civil society where the fundamental rule of what makes a civil society, which is having borders and having people who are citizens versus not citizens, is just violated and anyone's allowed into the country. And that said, the way that you remove people from the country also matters. There's a difference between seizing people on the street and throwing them into vans and separating women from children and making hype reels about it on X and Instagram and set to Pokemon theme music. And by the way, this is the thing that's actually happened. Versus saying, hey, well, we're going to actually just enforce the law. We're going to penalize businesses who are employing people illegally. We're going to send business owners to prison if they're found to be employing people illegally. And guess what? If we do that, then people will naturally want to leave. Because why are people here? Because they can get employment here. If they can't get employment illegally anymore, they probably just want to go back to their home country.
Right.
And if we do need a labor force from other countries because we don't have enough Americans who want to do these jobs, which is sometimes a claim, then we can give people seasonal visas to come here and work here on a temporary basis.
That's the fucking part of this that is so annoying to me. It's like, okay, there's a broken law system. Like, let's not use the workaround and just be like, yeah, so
well, we need them.
Well, we need it. No, change the fucking laws then.
Yeah.
Like, make it real easy to get a 3-month, 6-month seasonal visa, go through an interview process, and just open up. It's so hard. I know so many people who can contribute so profoundly to American society because I know them personally.
Yeah.
And to see their struggle to get a visa so that they can work here, it's just like, there's a lot of amazing people that want to come in a variety of ways. How about we enforce the laws and then simultaneously create new laws that are actually going to allow this to function in a real way where nobody's actually breaking the law and everybody can be taken care of. Like, come on. Like, this is not like, it's not that hard. And I really appreciate what you're saying about like the how we enforce it. I think that's also very important too, because we've lived for so long in this loophole of like, they're, just illegals. We need them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're sounding like an open borders communist now, Aubrey.
I've been called worse.
Right? It's like you're both an open borders communist and a Nazi fascist at the same time.
I know.
Right?
How about that?
For just wanting to escape the false dichotomy of it's either left or it's right. It's like maybe there's something in the middle here. Maybe there's a way for us to, overhaul our legal immigration system so that we're not reliant on illegal immigration and not using that to justify people entering the country without us even knowing who they are or where they're coming from. And at the same time, making sure that we are honoring the principles and laws that make America appealing to be in the first place. Right. Because if we're not honoring the legal system, which is the set of rules that we have, that we all agree to play by, that makes us a country, guess what? Very soon, we become no better than the countries that these people are fleeing from. And the reason that people are fleeing from these countries like Venezuela, for example, is because in many cases, they're failed or failing states. So I think a lot of the time, this is going back to like the principles of civil society. Like what are some of the core functions of civil society? When America was founded, there were only 3 departments. I think it was War, Treasury, and like the Secretary of State Department. And the recognition was, well, you need the Secretary of State because you need a department that's coordinating all the states in conversation with foreign nations. You need the Treasury because you need a common currency. Why do you have the Department of War? Or it was called defense now, but war. Well, it wasn't necessarily to wage war, although if it comes to that, you do that, but also to just defend the homeland. But when we're not even protecting the homeland, and we're justifying not protecting the homeland by saying, well, our legal immigration system is not good, so we should have illegal immigration. It's like we're actually throwing away the whole American project to begin with.
Yeah.
But it becomes so difficult to have these conversations because, again, going back to tribalism, people only hear one half of what you're saying when you're actually being nuanced.
Right.
So they hear you say, we need a better legal immigration system because we actually do want immigrants here. We want people who are contributing to America. And they're like, well, you're a communist now. Or if you say, well, we shouldn't just have people here illegally. It's actually not okay to do that. Well, now you're a fascist. It's like, no, there's a unity of these two things.
Yes.
And if we can stop with the labels for long enough to listen, we can find that beautiful middle. And a lot of the time, it's actually not that complicated. But of course, in politics, the incentive is not to get to the truth. It's to instigate a feeling in your tribe so that you get elected. And I think people, they blame the media and they blame the politicians, but it's us. It's us. Like, why does the media provide us with biased content? Because we consume it. Why do politicians
eat it up with a spoon?
We eat it up and ask for more.
Yeah.
Like, why do politicians tell us lies and then not follow through? Because we allow it.
Yeah.
Because we don't vote. We don't vote in our local elections. We only pay attention every 4 years. I'm guilty of this too, by the way. I started paying attention to politics like last year.
Yep.
And we're not actually exercising our authority. We're not exercising our agency. We're not choosing to do things like, if you hop on Instagram, you hop on X, you have someone yelling at you on your newsfeed, you just unfollow them. It's like, I don't even care what you're saying. The way that you're saying it is destructive. So we're not going to do this. But the good news is we're all part of the problem, so we can be part of the solution too.
One of the things that was really frustrating when I, entered into politics solely because of RFK Jr. And a particular relationship and a kind of a relationship that transcended my mind, heart, body, spirit. I was like, I'm part of my own dharma, my destiny is to lend support because I admire, he's not a perfect man. Nobody is perfect. Nobody is perfect. Nobody hits the mark in every different way. But I admire him so much, and he's a dear friend, and it drew me in. And then, of course, my own base of followers and people who found me were more on the spiritual community side. Now I have plenty of comments about that. But there was so many people being like, "You're an idiot, man. Why are you even caring about politics? Like, why that doesn't even matter, bro." And I'm like, "What do you mean? How I don't understand the logic behind not caring about these things that deeply impact our lives. Like, do you remember the pandemic? Do you remember what it was like when we had policies in place that were shutting down businesses and restricting travel and forcing people to do things they didn't want to do, and that was those were political choices. Like the idea that we can just step away from politics and everything will work itself out. It's a bad idea. It's poor thinking. It's
inescapable. I mean, spirituality is your individual life. Politics is our collective life. There's not a separation between these two things. And I wish the political community was more spiritual, and I wish the spiritual community was more political, because they have a lot to learn from each other.
Totally.
We haven't really talked about my backstory, so I'm just like this guy who just hopped on the podcast. But just to give some background for people who are maybe not familiar with me, I only really started paying attention to politics last year. Before that, I was very spiritual, life coach, plant medicine, healing, all of those circles. And I actually intentionally avoided politics in the news because I thought it was dumb. I thought it was a waste of time. I was like, oh, what's the point? We just vote every 4 years. Nothing really changes anyway. And then in 2024, I started paying attention because obviously the election was so hot that it was impossible to ignore. And I realized, wow, this is actually not even a political problem. This is a human problem. We've lost the ability to communicate. We've lost the ability to coordinate. We've lost the ability to listen to each other. We're constantly projecting our own unhappiness and our own anger and our own grief out on other people and not taking responsibility for it. And so much of that is just being reflected in our politicians, but it doesn't start with our politicians. So for someone to say, oh, well, this is dumb, why are you talking about politics? Is because politics is life. Politics is how a civilization is ordered and how it functions. So I think it's actually a big mistake. And that's part of why I'm excited to talk to you and talk to your community to try to escape it. Because if everyone's noticed, you might not be into politics, but politics is into you.
Totally.
So it's like you can either try to ignore it and hold on to whatever beliefs you had and double down, or you can just open up and try to bring the teachings and the personal awareness you've had and apply it to the collective, because people need leadership right now. Like, I think a lot of people, they're just really unhappy and really confused and really scared.
Yeah.
And I don't actually think there's going to be a political revolution without a spiritual revolution as well.
Well said. Well said. All right, let's put Trump let's put Trump in the, under the bright lights.
Sure.
Right now. And let's talk about, I'd love to hear your perspectives on, what he's done well in this, particularly this last term. I think like Trump term one, it was kind of chaos. My personal belief is he was just figuring a lot of things out. But he has a much clearer telos, like he's kind of has an aim that's pretty clear here. So let's just talk about the second term. We can go back to the first if you really want, but in particularly second term Trump, let's put him under the spotlight. And I would love to hear your thoughts on, all right, what do you like that he's done? What do you agree with? What are the nuances in what you agree with? What are the things that you actually don't agree with? Where do you think his challenges are? So let's put Trump in the spotlight.
Sure. So first, let me identify the categories of policy issues, because sometimes people, when they talk about politicians, it just boils down to whether you like the person or not. And character matters, but what they're trying to accomplish also matters. And we should remember the backdrop of the 2024 election, because what was happening was we're embroiled in a bunch of foreign conflicts. So the Ukraine-Russia war was still ongoing, and the Gaza conflict, which at least has a temporary ceasefire, maybe a permanent ceasefire, which is great, and the hostages have been returned. There was the illegal immigration crisis, both the crisis of the border functionally being open and millions of people entering the country over the course of the Biden administration. Of course, that issue predates Biden, and it goes back to Obama and Trump and Clinton and Bush, but it reached a new peak under Biden.
Totally.
So that was an issue. And that's a national security issue as well as like a social contract issue. Then there's the question of what do we do about the people who are already in the country illegally, the 10 to 30 million people in the country illegally. What do we do about that? Then there were economic issues. And then I would say there's also cultural issues, right? So there was like the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion policies, and these like kind of racial identity politics. There's gender stuff and transgenderism and children undergoing transgender surgeries. And there's a cultural dimension here that we want to talk about.
Abortion would probably be included in that.
Yeah, abortion as well. And then I would say the last major category, and I think this is something that you need to kind of really pay attention to politics to see, but was more about freedom versus control of information. So, before we hopped on to the podcast, you were talking to me about how you had RFK on, and simply for having him on your podcast, you received a strike on YouTube. That was very common. And it was one directional. I'm not saying that the right doesn't try to take free speech away from the left, but the left was definitely trying to take free speech away from the right, and they had the power to do it because they had control. They had the presidency. So there was also this totalitarianism that was creeping up in our information landscape, and people were banned off of multiple platforms for having contrarian views about COVID or what have you. Our current president was banned off Twitter and YouTube and Facebook. I mean, like,
how crazy is that?
Think about that.
How crazy is that?
So I'm just outlining all the categories because I want us to be really precise in our discussion.
Yes,
so it's not just like, I like Trump, I dislike Trump. So now evaluating each of those in turn, I'll start with the foreign wars. I think Trump has done an excellent job in the Middle East. I think the fact that the Gaza conflict has been brought to at least a temporary halt and the Israeli hostages have been returned, Palestinians are not getting bombed anymore. There's still issues to work out there, but it's drastically better. And I think that it's not a given that would have just been resolved by itself. I think that's a conflict that could have metastasized into something much worse in the region.
And it looked like it might.
Yeah. And my concern at the time was the potential advent of World War III, literally. I mean, Middle East is such a volatile region. So much of the rest of the world is connected to what happens there. And I was concerned if someone doesn't figure this situation out, this could blow up really fast. So I think he's done an excellent job on Middle East policy. I think he also handled Iran well. So there was that tension earlier in the year about Iran getting a nuke. I think Trump handled that extremely well. I'm disappointed in his handling of Ukraine-Russia. The conflict's still not resolved. It's the bloodiest conflict on the planet. And like at this point, over 1 million people have died, Ukrainians and Russians collectively.
And he thought, it feels like he thought he could figure that out.
I think he genuinely thought he could. I think he genuinely tried.
Yeah.
It's also a really difficult situation to solve. I think as recently as this morning, Marco Rubio, our head of state, said they're refocusing on it and they have a new strategy. So I think the jury's still out, but I am disappointed on he said he would resolve it by now. It's not resolved. So, if you're going to call your shot, follow through on your shot. And at the same time, if we looked at the counterfactual, like what would the Democrats have done in that situation, I'm not convinced that they would have done any better. In fact, I think it would have gotten worse under them.
Well, they were just feeding more money into Ukraine, which was just more deaths of Ukrainians ultimately. I mean, it's a complicated, nuanced issue that's very difficult. But yeah, no, I'm with you. I think he said he was going to resolve it. He looked like he tried, and I think, I don't know if you agree with this opinion, but I think Trump has he resolves things by using his weight and leverage and somewhat kind of bully tactics when it comes to either tariffs or a variety. He imposes his authority. And I think he ran into Putin, who's like, I'm also a big dog. And like he wasn't able to resolve it in that particular way. Now I'm not in the room. I'm not in the conversations. I don't know exactly what happened, but as I look at it, I'm thinking like, how come he wasn't able to do this?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Trump is capable of doing it though. I'm not confident that Kamala would have been capable of doing it.
Agreed.
And I think you need a big dog to take on other big dogs.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. So on the foreign policy front, I think the Middle East resolution, big deal. Really well done. Ukraine, Russia, jury's still out. I'm disappointed, but this could be resolved pretty soon too. So we'll see.
Let's pray.
Yeah. So let's pray. We're 10 months in.
Yeah.
Now, if we talk about illegal immigration, so we kind of touched on this a little bit. I think on closing the border, A+. The border was open and we were told that, we need Congress to pass a bill to close the border. And, it's complicated and we have a long-term strategy. Within like a month in office, border crossings dropped to near zero under Trump. No new congressional bill, just executive authority and clear decision-making. That could have been done at any point during the Biden administration. Yeah. So top marks there. On the handling of the illegal immigrants who are currently here, I think, again, I agree with the general direction as we need to remove people who are here illegally. I'm open to carving out some categories. Like, for example, if someone's a senior citizen or they're in the country and they have kids who are American citizens because they had children here, like I am open to keeping them here under those circumstances. But in general, I do think we need to be deporting people who are here.
In those circumstances, pass some executive order that says there's, the ability to actually bring people into an interview to give immediate visa or green card status under extenuating circumstances. There could have been something else to mitigate some of these issues that you're talking about. That wasn't just a loophole, but it was a new policy.
Yeah, we could overhaul the whole legal immigration system so it reduces the incentives and the need to have illegal immigrants. And where this is probably my biggest criticism of the Trump administration, the way in which he's going about doing these deportations in tone is awful. It feels like celebrating. I mean, cruelty is a loaded term, but let's just talk about what's
just
actually
fully discompassionate.
Yeah, I mean, like I get that these people broke the law. They broke the law, and there has to be consequences. And at the same time, there shouldn't be a celebratory atmosphere about removing people from the country because they are here to have a better life. And it sucks that we have to remove them, and I think that we do, but this shouldn't be something that we're like making memes about and making montage trailers about. Like, it's just in poor taste. This can be quieter, this can be gentler, it can be more humane. So I really don't like the way that they're going about the illegal immigration deportations. And I think and I will say that some of the ways in which they've done it, I think are good. So for example, many people don't know this, but people who voluntarily left the country, like self-deported, they actually were paid money to leave, which I think is the right way to do it. Because last I checked, it was about $17,000 per forced deportation. That's a lot of taxpayer money to deport people. And think of trying to deport millions of people. That's billions and billions of dollars. I think what's better is saying, hey, if you just choose to leave the country, we're going to give you a resettlement payment so that you can land on your feet back in your home country. We're going to fine employers so that they're not paying you under the table. That just shouldn't be happening. We got to follow the laws. And yeah, the whole process could be a lot gentler by just fixing the incentive model. And rather than doing that process, which I think would be cheaper and more effective and less emotional, I think he's going the complete opposite. And I think he's squandering a lot of political capital while he's doing it. So I think that's the biggest failing of the Trump administration. Economically, this is always somewhere I like to be. I'm not an economist. I don't understand this stuff. So just personally, my general heuristic for thinking about this is structural economic changes take time. We're 10 months in. If we look at the 80s and 90s, that was like actually the longest period of peaceful prosperity in American history. And a lot of that came after Reagan pushed massive deregulation and tax cuts. He actually left office as one of the highest approval rating presidents upon exit. He was like 63 to 68%. It took time, right? They went through a hard part economically before they got to the good part. So I think jury is genuinely still out. What I will say, though, is I think culturally his economic policy is actually putting America's needs first.
Right.
And I don't think politicians on either side have been doing that for a long time. And I think that's why for a lot of people, the economic American dream is gone. Like we have people graduating who are like, I'm never going to be able to afford a house. I can't even pay off my college debt. We have an entire swath of middle America where manufacturing jobs disappeared and they went overseas to places like China, and those people feel left behind. So I think what Trump is doing with, yes, the tariffs, I think the way he's doing that is it could be done a lot better. I think Congress should be passing a lot of these authorizations, but directionally, I don't think anyone was even thinking about tariff policy before. And people say, well, tariffs are bad. It's like, well, why do other countries tariff us?
Totally.
And they tariff us more than we tariff them. And they started tariffing us because after the World War II, we allowed them to tariff us more because they needed it because they were going through post-war recovery in Europe. But now they're not in post-war recovery anymore. So why do they get to tariff us like 40, 60, 80% and we tariff them zero? So I think just intuitively, when you look at that, it's like, hey, we should rebalance things. Now, I think Trump is using it to kind of bully and get more concessions beyond just economic concessions. But frankly, I just like that there's someone who is putting America's economic needs first rather than just globalist needs and corporations who employ someone in China for cheap, then sells these products to America benefiting. And I think that's part of what people are feeling. It's like, I don't feel like politicians are actually trying to take care of the little person anymore. And I think that Trump is actually trying to take care of the little person. So jury's still out, but directionally, I actually quite like what he's doing economically. Now, this is like a cultural piece, and this is one of the most sensitive things because it's so much about.
Let's spend some time here because this is something that you really go into deep.
Yeah, so let's talk about the racial stuff first, because during the election there was a lot of conversation about wokeism and like the woke left, and we should talk about like what that actually means. I think one of the clearest representations of wokeism was diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. And to give DEI policies their due, the intention of DEI policies is to support and protect historically disadvantaged groups by giving them support in present day, right? So it could be redistribution of resources or giving people advantages in hiring or college admissions. I understand the spirit of it. So 'cause if you talk about, for instance, a Black person here, if you're a Black person in present day, in my belief, is not a ton of active oppression anymore. In fact, not a ton. I think you'd be really hard pressed to find active oppression in 2025 America. That said, the legacy of slavery still lives on in America. And of course, entire lineages have been set behind, right? So if your great-great-grandfather was a slave in chains and they never got reparations for that, of course, that affects you in present day because it affects your starting line in life. But what has happened is we justify present discrimination by pointing to past discrimination, and it's just perpetuating the cycle of discrimination. And I think this is actually one of the things that Charlie Kirk was misunderstood about. People were painting Charlie Kirk as some sort of white nationalist, or he's like pro-white. And I think what he was actually trying to preach is being pro-principle, pro-equality. And what he was seeing was that there's this culture of hostility toward white people that was developing in this country. And it was showing up in, I mean, I think it was literally showing up in like just culturally, like what you're allowed to even talk about. Like, is it okay to talk about race? But it was also showing up in just taking advantages away from white people or Asian people, not that, they're a historically advantaged group, to give more benefits to Black people by pointing to the past harms against Black people. And again, it's just perpetuating more resentment, because if you're a white person in 2025, you didn't participate in slavery. And many people who are white people who are here now, their parents or their great-great-grandparents weren't even in America during slavery or Jim Crow. Right? They might have tried to escape the potato famine from Ireland, or escape the Armenian genocide.
My family escaped the Russian pogroms in the late 1800s.
Yeah. So are there disparities? Of course, in America. And I think we can deal with those disparities without perpetuating more discrimination, though. Like, we could take it for a geographical lens. One problem that maps onto the Black community pretty directly is Black schools, or schools with predominantly Black populations, often are less well-funded because the Black community has less wealth. So there's less wealth to go into their schools. It's like, but we can fix that on a zip code basis. We don't need to say, well, if you're Black, you get this, and if you're white, you lose that. So I feel like I experienced this pretty directly in college because I went to Harvard, and I like to think I would have gotten into Harvard no matter what, because I did well in school, but I know that I benefited from thank you. But I benefited from affirmative action too, right? Like, of course, I checked the box knowing checking this box of me saying I'm African American is going to help me. That's not good.
Right.
That's not a healthy culture where it's like, oh, I checked the box, now I get treated differently than you. That's the antithetical to egalitarian principles. So let's not do that.
Yeah, let's live in a meritocracy.
Yeah, let's just live in a meritocracy and recognize that, not everyone has the same starting line. Everyone can have the same finish line. And let's figure out how can we make the starting line equal, but not by taking away from other people's starting line. That just breeds more resentment, and it causes people to view each other through a racial lens. And I remember before I got into politics, like, I wasn't thinking about this Black, white stuff all the time. I was just like, I have friends. Some of them are Black, some of them are white. I wasn't thinking about this stuff.
Totally.
And then I started paying attention to politics. Like, wow, you guys are talking about this stuff all the time. Is anyone enjoying this? You can't build anything on these fixed concepts of self, right? We need to have unifying concepts like, I don't know, like the values espoused in the Constitution. Like, that stuff we can all opt into, but you can't change your identity. I feel the same way about this gender stuff. Look, any framework that is built on immutable characteristics inherently can't grow. So if everything you're talking about is based on what skin you were born with and what genitals you were born with, well, guess what? We can't actually be unified in that, because that's just hardware we were given out of the box. What we can unify around are, like, what are our principles for, like, how we can be great together? Like, what does it mean to be an American? And unfortunately, there's so much anti-American sentiment and, frankly, just self-hatred. Like, people are not proud to be American. All of a sudden, like, being American, like waving an American flag is like far right coded.
It's like a Nazi flag.
It's crazy to me.
For some people.
Yeah, this country's amazing. And we know it's objectively amazing because we have the highest rates of legal and illegal immigration in the world. Everyone wants to come here. Not many people are leaving. But I think we've lost sight of the fact that America is special, and what makes America special is our universal principles: free speech, religious pluralism, rule of law. These are things that are not a given in other societies. But instead of that being the thing that we point to as like our unifying identity, it's no, what sex are you, and what gender are you, and what race are you, and how much has someone who looked like you been oppressed in the past? It's not constructive. So I think part of what Trump represented was a bulwark against that stuff. Like, we just let it go too far. And I'm all for, like, let's acknowledge the sins of our forefathers. For sure. We should never forget slavery. We should never forget how Native Americans were treated. We shouldn't forget any of that. We should never forget how women have been treated historically. But let's not live there. We can't create the future by constantly looking at the past. So I think for me, this is, yes, it's partially emotional, but hopefully I've explained the principles of it. Trump represented a positive vision of, like, let's make America great. And I know a lot of people don't like that, but it's like, what's the implication? That America is something that's worth making great. And I wasn't seeing that vision at all from the left. All I saw from the left was a grievance agenda. And I wasn't about to sign up for that personally. So culturally, I think that we're moving in the right direction for sure. I think people are more relaxed talking about these things now. I think the Sydney Sweeney ad, we can talk about that. I think you saw what happened there. It was actually kind of a representation of like, let's like joke and be light and like, can comedy be back? Like, is it okay like joke? Like it used to be that black and white people would joke about being black and white. You remember Tropic Thunder? That was fun. What happened to all that, right? Why are we so uptight about everything? So yeah, I think it's actually a good sign that like humor is back. And on the other side, as I mentioned with the ICE deportations, there can be some cruelty, and we need to not bring it too far in the other direction and be discompassionate, if I don't know if that's a word.
So let's just, zeroing in on this kind of racialization of topics. I went to high school in the 90s here in Austin, went to Westlake High, and we had a particular, I'm a ball player. So like a ball player is just a fucking ball player. It's like, how wet is your jump shot? Like how good are you at fucking rebounding? And like, it's just like, I never thought of it like, I got a black teammate or I got a black opponent. It was like, are you fucking good?
Yeah.
Can you make buckets? Like, are you like the sports? That's one thing I think that's beautiful about sports is they're inherently a meritocracy and they haven't been fucked with.
Yeah.
And again, historically they were, and there's stories of like repression of black athletes that were better than white athletes that were not allowed. And like, yeah, that was fucked up. And all by the 90s, like everybody was cool with that. Like that was over. Like people, I didn't grow up thinking about race in that way. And I think part of it was because I was an athlete, and also part of it just wasn't as present. And then all of a sudden it's just gotten more and more present, where it's like we're expected to think about it in every moment and every decision.
Yes. And it's because of social media. Social media has ruined race relations in this country. There's actually a graph showing that before 2013, 2014, the perception of white people, of white-black race relations was at a historic high, around 70%. And perception of black people, of white-black race relations was also at a historic high, like mid to high 60s. Around 2013, 2014, what started to happen? Well, it wasn't all of a sudden like people became racist or black people and white people started hurting each other in the streets or something like that. What happened was social media made us more hyper aware of instances of injustice. So situations like Trayvon Martin, for example, awful situation.
Terrible.
Of course, terrible situation. But before social media, it's not like the whole country would see all of this. And when everyone sees it, it's important that we can have awareness. But what happens is a logical fallacy breaks in, which is called base rate fallacy. So base rate fallacy is the tendency to look at an event without considering its underlying frequency. So how often is this event actually happening? So on everyone's phones, like, oh my God, black people are being oppressed and they're constantly being hurt and there's so much police brutality. When in reality, there was no spike in police brutality against black people or any other group for that matter around 2013, 2014. What there was a spike in is social media use. And social media has this way of scrambling our brains where instead of considering what is the broader reality and what's a broader context, it's like, no, what's on my phone? What's available to me right now? And it plays on another bias called availability bias. So rather than looking at the whole data set, we look at what's most available to us. So of course, it was the same thing with George Floyd. Like, awful situation, right? And it's good that the cop was punished because he went way too far.
Yep.
And he abused his power. And that's a serious problem, especially when you're talking about someone who's an authority versus a citizen.
Sure.
And of course, the racial dynamics to the extent that, I don't know what was going on in the police officer's brain, but yeah, symbolically, it looked terrible to people. And at the same time, we're behaving as if the situation of black people in this country has worsened in the last 10 years relative to the prior years. And that's just not true. Social media has caused people to feel like the world is far more negative than it actually is. And it's actually a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because if you look at your phone, you're like, wow, everything is awful. This is like, we're in the end times. All of a sudden, the end times start to present themselves because we all start being really, really negative. So we can be specific about specific instances and say, this is wrong. This should never happen. What happened with Trayvon Martin, what happened with George Floyd should never happen, without saying this is happening all the time. Because it's just not true.
Yeah.
And yeah, we kind of just need to touch grass more. Like we really need to like be communing in person and replacing social media with actual socializing.
Yeah. I remember that when, everything kind of exploded in the BLM moment where it reached this kind of like heightened peak. And I had always ascribed personally to like, I don't like color is like not a thing that I register first when I'm looking out at a group of people. I'm like, there's the black guys, there's the Chinese guys, there's the Mexican guys. It's like, there's a group of people. And I remember I think I made some post where, maybe he was even referring to MLK, people being judged on the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. And this idea of like, let's just get beyond this. We're all children of God. We have different melanin that protected us from different strengths of sun at different points in time and different historic lineages, which, yes, support and hold in reverence these historic lineages and the medicine keepers and the knowledge keepers and the plant medicine, traditions of all of these cultures. I'm wildly in support of, keeping intact the cultural roots. And that's super important. However, I had this idea that like actually color blindness is a helpful, like that's actually where we're going. And then I put something out like that and it was like, how fucking dare you? Not see color when you look at a person. I was like, whoa. I mean, so what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I get this. I get the sentiment behind the idea of color blindness, but I almost think like, look, I see color because I have functioning eyeballs, right? We all see color. I think the sentiment behind color blindness is not so much don't see color, but don't take it so seriously.
Right.
Like, don't be so attached to color.
Right.
Like, there's so many ways that we can connect with humans besides color. For some people, it is color. Some people, as I said, they like to live in neighborhoods where people look like them. Other people like to live in neighborhoods where people think like them. Other people like to live in neighborhoods where people do recreational activities like them. But we've artificially hyper-focused on color of skin as like the dominant personality trait of any other person. And it's not useful. As I said, you can't actually build anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think sometimes when people see like color blindness, they're like, oh, well, you're being insensitive. I think that's how it comes across to some people, as opposed to saying, hey, we need to like transcend this incessant focus on color.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said before, I think it would be healthy if it was about as important as what your favorite ice cream is. It's like,
Right.
I fucking love vanilla ice cream, right? I'm not about to fight someone over them liking chocolate ice cream. Right? It's like, and of course, it's more important to people than that because there's ancestry and there's traditions and all that. But just, I present that framing just so that people see, look, the issue is not that color exists. The issue is that we're treating it like it's the most important thing.
Right.
And it's not. And if we keep treating it like it's the most important thing, it will be treated like the most important thing. And you know what I started to see is this atomization of racial groups where, Black people have grievances and then they start to justify the misbehavior of other Black people because it's like, well, look at what happened to our ancestors. And then white people see that Black people are misbehaving. So then white people are misbehaving in retaliation. And it's this grievance cycle. It's this transferring resentment from one group to another. I'll give you an example of this to make it concrete. Several months ago, there was this incident where a teenager named Carmelo Anthony, who was Black, murdered a kid named Austin Metcalf, who was white. And what happened, if you look at this situation just in principle, it was pretty cut and dry. Like, Austin Metcalf, the white kid, confronted the Black kid because they were at a high school track meet and the Black kid was in the wrong tent. And then the Black kid overreacted and stabbed the white kid in the chest and ran away. And he died. So I think if our unifying principle is, hey, we want to all have respect for life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, then I think everyone would be like, yeah, that's just cut and dry. This is wrong. And this teenager should be in prison for this. What actually happened was the Black teenager's family, the murderer's family, they started a GoFundMe, a fundraiser, and they raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. And a lot of that money, as far as I could see, was just because it's just tribal. Like, people were like, well, we got to support this guy. He's Black. And white people have done all this other stuff. And what about all these other past incidents? As opposed to just examining the individual incident and saying, hey, what's right in principle? What's the humane thing to do here? And then in response, several weeks later, there was a white lady named Shiloh Hendricks who went to a park. While she was at that park, a small black child went into her purse or her bag or something. I don't know if the kid was just curious or stealing something. Who knows, right? She freaks out, calls a little kid the N-word. She then goes viral because someone's recording her calling the kid the N-word and people are really upset. They start sending her death threats. She starts a GoFundMe and she raises even more money than the black family did for the black teenager murdering the white kid. So, of course, these instances are not the same. Like one person murdered someone and the other person's called a little kid a horrible name. But the dynamic is similar, where you had a bunch of people like who were resentful white people donating to Shiloh Hendricks' cause in reaction to resentful black people donating to Carmelo Anthony's cause. This is not constructive. This doesn't end well. If people are abandoning principles and can't see the simple universal principle of, no, you don't get to murder someone because they confronted you at a high school track meet. No, as a grown woman, you don't get to call a little kid the N-word because they went in your bag. If people can't agree on these principles and instead everything's about tribe, then there's zero ability for the tribes to connect.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that's really destructive about this hyper-color consciousness. And I think that's what color blindness is meant to be a solution to. And at the same time, I would say it's not be colorblind, just don't be so color attached.
Yeah, and I think the blindness is, if taken literally, it's absurd.
Yeah.
Because like we have eyes, like you said. But it's a metaphor.
Yeah.
For actually placing all kinds of a list of characteristics way above that in your heuristic of what you're actually deciding this human is and what they stand for. It's like just deprioritizing. And that's really so, in a way, it's really, to me, means just color deprioritization, you know, and like, just like, yeah, of course, acknowledge it. Like I wasn't confused that, you know, I was going to be doing a podcast with a black guy today. Like, I was like, surprise. It's like, oh, fuck.
Oh, wait, what?
Oh, shit. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And I think a lot of these things that are done with, you know, seemingly good intentions have terrible consequences.
Yeah. And if I can point out, this is why, at the beginning of the podcast, we talked about like, you're a black conservative. And I was like, I don't really know about the black label. It's not because my skin's not black. I know what I am. But even these black-white labels, these racial identities are a new invention. So in the late 18th century, there was a physician. His name is Johann Blumenbach. And he decided he wants to sort humans into a taxonomy of different humans, different races of humans. It hadn't existed before. Obviously, people would recognize you come from this region, but people weren't thinking in terms of these are white people, black people, Asian people. Although if you think to yourself, like, why are black people called black people, white people called white people, but Asian people are called Asian people, not yellow people? It's not even consistent nomenclature, right?
Right.
It just shows you how artificial this whole racial construct is. But anyway, he took humans from different regions and he sorted them by skull size and he said, okay, well, this is the black race, this is the white race, and so on. He wasn't necessarily trying to be racist. He was just racial. And racist implies that some sort of hierarchy, some sort of superiority. Then a few years later, a man named Georges Cuvier comes around, who's an actual racist. And he saw this taxonomy that Johann Blumenbach made, and he says, oh, well, we're going to use this to justify racial superiority and literal white supremacy. This was all invented. Now, the reason I point this out is because race itself is not scientific. And there's no scientific definition for race. It's like, what is race? Well, it's like kind of you know it when you see it. That's not scientific, right? It's like if someone is half black and half white, they had a black parent and a white parent, are they black or white? Well, the answer is it depends on what they look like. That's not scientific, right? Like in science, it's like, no. It's like, no, you have these genes. Or your parent came from this region and that's why you're African American because your parents came from Africa, right? But there's a difference between ancestry and ethnicity versus race. Race is made up. I'm not saying we can't use it though, because America is also made up. America is an idea. It's an idea that we all buy into. I think America is a useful idea though, because we can actually build something for America. People can opt into the idea of America and grow something. It's generative. Race is a degenerate concept. You can't build things with race. That's why the Romans, who had a much longer lasting empire than America did, they weren't racial as a society. Even when they would conquer other people, they would say, okay, we conquered you. You might look different than us, but you can be a Roman.
Mhm.
You just have to agree to Roman principles. And actually, in the, I think it was like in like the year 70 AD, they had a dark-skinned emperor. His name was, I think it was Septimius Severus.
Mhm.
People can look it up. But he was a dark-skinned emperor who came from North Africa. It's like, well, how did that happen? Because, the Romans, they looked like olive skin or light skinned because people didn't care. He was the most competent guy around. He was a Roman. He agreed to Roman precepts. So, of course, Rome was not perfect, but I think it shows us something. How can you have an enduring empire that lasts like over 1,000 years? Well, you have the empire be united by things that we can grow into rather than things that divide us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well
that's why
said.
I hate the black-white stuff. It doesn't even make sense. It's like, are Native Americans the brown people? Like, are Latin Americans the brown people? Are Asians the yellow people? It's like, why do we refer to some people by color and some people by region? It's not even consistent.
And even if we actually look deep enough and have the patience, most of us have done an ancestral DNA test.
Mhm.
You get a readout of your dominant ancestry, and then you keep going down the list. You got everything in there. Like most of us have a little bit of fucking everything.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? That means nuance. Actually, we're a living nuance. And the moment that you eradicate nuance and then put people neatly in groups, you're not telling the truth.
Yeah.
Fundamentally.
Yeah. And you know what the tragic, I say funny, but it's funny in a sad way. Johann Blumenbach, the guy who made the whole racial categories, he was actually a Christian. So his fundamental belief is we're all equal and we all come from the same source. But in his effort to make these racial categories, he enabled this division and this delusion that we're all fundamentally separate. And that's why I just don't like the racial stuff. It just divides us inherently. It has to. That's how it's designed.
Right. So I'm going to jump in and I want to talk about some more of the other issues while Trump's still, we haven't taken him out of the spotlight.
Yeah.
I had a strong sense that this was going to be a glaring weakness in his administration. I don't really feel like he loves our Earth Mother, and we both share a plant medicine background. And if you do ayahuasca, the Earth is not just the Earth. The Earth is Gaia and connected to grandmother ayahuasca, and it's our living mother, right? And we have a feeling of like we do for our real mothers. Like, yes, I want to take care of my mother, Kathy, for sure. I love her so much. She's done so much for me. She's the fucking best. I love my mom.
Yeah.
And then I can also widen my gaze and I can look out at Gaia Sophia, this amazing planet we live on, and be like, fuck, like, I love my mom. I love my mom and I want to take care of her. And I just don't feel that Trump has that same feeling. I feel like the Earth is a place that we live, that if we can extract what we need for progress, so be it. And I think I've seen that in different, policy decisions about, opening up the ability for people to scoop the bottom of the sea to get polymetallic nodules for rare earth elements and things like that. So I've seen that kind of come to fruition and I kind of expected it. And it was like, fuck, which is really why I wanted Kennedy in there, because he feels the same way I do about Gaia. Now, he doesn't have the plant medicine background. He's been sober forever, but he naturally feels it. He's got a iNature app on his phone, and he's like one of the highest scoring iNature people, categorizing the plants and animals
Of course.
from every hike that he's ever been on, and getting in little mini disputes about people about the genus of this particular beetle that he categorized and whether it was this one or that one. And this is his hobby. Like he loves nature. And that's, I think one of the things that it's just, it's a bummer.
It is a bummer. And yeah, I think part of maybe actually a good representation of this is the whole climate change discussion. It's one of those areas where there's a massive false dichotomy and there just doesn't need to be one, where we saw under the Biden administration a lack of a nuanced approach to dealing with climate change. Because, look, the climate is changing, and there's a transition that the human species needs to manage so that when the climate changes, we are able to survive those climate changes. And at the same time, a lot of the narrative around it was very fearful. Like, we can't do anything because the climate's going to change. And if we try to produce things, or now the narrative is like AI is going to use too much power, it's going to hurt the climate, it's going to hurt us all. So there was a very fear-driven narrative around climate. And I think Trump represents the opposite extreme, which is like, I'm speculating, but to maybe say what you basically said, it's like he doesn't seem to care that much or think about the environment that much. And yeah, I think this is one of those areas where it's just a downside, right? It's a downside. There's no perfect president. There's no president who I expect to have their finger on the pulse of everything. That said, I do think this is one of those areas where technology can really help us, because part of the problem is just, we're just too reliant on fossil fuels. So what's the solution? We need to get better sources of energy. So we need more solar energy. And we have a solar industry that's become more robust over the last several years. We need more nuclear energy. And actually, one of the things under the Biden administration is they made nuclear power development very difficult to access. And we're actually really behind places like China, where they've been way more aggressive on nuclear development. Now, the reason that there's like tons of regulations on nuclear that make it extremely expensive to build like a nuclear power plant, because we all have like this like memory of like Fukushima Chernobyl and all these disasters. But at least I'm not a nuclear scientist, but what I've heard is that nuclear is actually very safe as a result of those experiences. We've actually learned from it. But we have a lot of fear around nuclear, so we're not leaning into this really abundant power source. So my hope is that nuclear plus solar will just get us off of fossil fuel consumption. Because look, at the end of the day, we're not going to limit our power consumption. I think humans are growth seeking, growth requires energy. And there's no limit to energy, right? Like we have a giant nuclear reactor in the center of the solar system called the sun. We need to figure out better how to harness that nuclear reactor while also building our own nuclear reactor here. And I think that's something that incentives can solve. And I will say that I don't think Trump is like an environmentalist by any stretch of the imagination. I do think he's very practical, though. And what he essentially was saying was, hey, look, to the extent that the climate is changing, well, we can't have people's like energy costs like double in the meantime, and people struggle in the meantime.
Yeah, and another one of the big concerns there was they were using these kind of climate ideologies to actually exert more control.
Exactly.
And tell us that, it was heading down a path that was, I think, obviously potentially exaggerated by people who were afraid of it, but it was a path where they're going to limit the amount of steaks we could buy, limit the amount of times we can go visit our mom with a gas-fueled car, limit the... So there was this kind of weird sliding into this environmental cause, which I think most of us are behind, but they were sliding in control mechanisms that were scary.
And it wasn't even equally distributed across the globe, because China didn't have to follow these regulations.
Right.
It was America. So also from just a competitive standpoint, right? Like, I don't believe in a zero-sum world, but there's competition and there's geopolitical power. We're passing rules that we had to follow, but China wasn't. It's just not fair. So I think Trump also had an instinct for that. It's like, hey, to the extent that we're going to have rules, we either all got to follow them or we're not going to follow them at all. Mm-hmm. Now, he's not the guy who's going to make the new global framework for climate emission control.
Yeah, that's not his job.
That's not his. Well, it could be his job. He's just not that guy.
Right.
But he is a guy who's going to say, hey, this is not going to be asymmetrical, though. We're not going to play like that. And that's what we were doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that in this, people want to say all good, all bad. And that's, when I put out my video about Trump, everybody, the ability to hold nuance and to say, like, I can still vote, I can still vote for Trump and still say, like, I'm deeply concerned about this. And there's a lot of nuance in this discussion about abortion. We don't need to go into that discussion, but it's one of the most nuanced topics as well, because I think a lot of confusion arises. Life is a value and choice is a value. And so both sides have a value that they're proposing. Now, how those two values are weighed and measured in the field of value to create the right law and policy, it's very complicated.
It is.
It's very nuanced. And everybody needs to take a breath and say, like, listen, both sides are proposing a value. Both of those are genuine values. Now, how do they work together? Difficult, question.
Exactly. And what I think often what we do is we try to resolve fundamental cultural questions through legal means. And that's backwards, I think, in the case of abortion. Because you have, look at the labels for these camps. It's either pro-choice or pro-life. Well, how do we get people to be pro-choosing life? It's like, why aren't we talking about how do we create a world where women are excited to have kids and men are excited to be in committed partnerships and people feel optimistic about their future so they want to have lots of kids? That's the most important conversation. Should we also talk about the legal dimension? Yeah, but that's like 99% of the conversation right now, when probably at least 80% of the conversation should be, how do we make a world so dope that people want to bring more humans into it?
Right.
As opposed to just what the law should be. And this is one of these things that, again, it becomes it's an ego battle. It's just a false dichotomy. It's like one side has to win, one side has to lose. And we're relying on the legal system for everything, as opposed to trying to figure out how do we create a culture where the choice to even have an abortion is chosen as little as possible. And we can do that. We're doing it right now by even having this conversation, but like the people can do that. And I just want to encourage everyone, where you think it's like black and white, can you look for gray? Like if it's this or that, it's like, well, does it have to be? And if someone really disagrees with you, can you represent their argument as well as they can? Because that's how you know you understand it.
Right.
Like I could sit here and make a whole podcast explaining why people voted for Kamala. Happily do that. And that's because I needed to understand why people voted for Kamala if I was going to vote for Trump.
And that's one of the things you did with Mamdani. You did you took your time to steel man. So for people who don't know, steel man, straw man. Steel man is when you propose the best argument that person represents and gives them the most benefit of the doubt. Let's steel man this person or this idea. Straw man is where you put up the weakest aspects of it, designed to be like a scarecrow, something that can be easily blown over. Steel, strong, straw, weak. And you do that really well, you know. And with Mamdani, you steel manned his, why are people voting for it? It's so important that we understand that we don't just say, oh, these fucking communist idiots, what are they going to do? We're ushering in Sharia law across the country. Like, we go to this hyperbolic state of like hysteria so fucking fast.
Yeah.
And we're not actually looking at, all right, let's look at this. Now, I have plenty of concerns about Mamdani. And I can watch your video steel manning and being like, perfect. I understand him better now. I understand the people who voted for him better now. And it's a great service that I think clear thinkers are providing.
Thank you. I think, a lot of people, they're like, well, why are you justifying this? It's not about justifying, it's about understanding. Because guess what? If let's say you think Zohran Mamdani is a genuine threat to America and his worldview is incompatible with America, or even if you think Muslim leadership is incompatible with Western values, like let's say you believe all of that. Well, the guy is a democratic socialist. He self-identifies as a democratic socialist. Democratic socialist is less extreme than communist. So if you can prove why democratic socialism is a bad idea, then you've automatically proven why communism is a bad idea. But if you just say, well, he's a communist, you haven't even engaged with the strongest version of the argument. So now people are like, well, you're not even listening. Nothing that comes out of this person's mouth is going to be convincing to you, so why even talk? I'll see you in the ring.
Yeah.
So that's part of why I try to model the steel man, because it's just a better way of accomplish what you want to accomplish. Because if you reject everything that's positive about a person and accept only what's negative about them, you can neither defeat your enemy nor make them your friend. So it's helpful no matter what, because you can either convince him, if he's really a secret communist, hey man, this is why communism is probably not a good idea in America. You should probably abandon this. I understand what you're trying to accomplish. You want to have, no one should be living in the streets. You want everyone to have health care. I get that, but this is not a great way to do that in this particular culture. So you might make him a friend, or you can prove to everyone who's following him why it's a dumb idea. But if you're just rejecting people and you're calling them names, then the people who agree with the person you're calling names are like, okay, well, screw you then.
See ya. We may delve back into, because these Islamic ideologies are it's very kind of present in culture right now. So we may go back there. So we'll bracket that and we'll see if we want to open that bracket further. There's one of the really disappointing moments was Trump had promised that he was going to open up the Epstein files, right? Like that was a big promise. We're going to get the Epstein list, and we're also going to get all the JFK files, and we're going to get all of these things exposed. you got a little bit of this and that on the JFK files, and it didn't feel like we got the full drop that we were hoping for, but they gave us a little something.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, it was like a magic trick. It was like a fucking David Copperfield moment where he just goes, "There's no Epstein list," and people were like, "What? What do you mean?"
Yeah.
Like, does it just mean that there was no sex trafficking going on? So Ghislaine Maxwell's in prison for something that didn't happen? You know, like, this is absurd. You know, there's women who were the ones being trafficked who have stories. You can talk to them, even if there is no list. Like, you can reform this list in a variety of different ways. So this was a very difficult moment, I think, for a lot of conservatives and a lot of people who are, that's the other thing about conservatives. Most of the conservatives I know are not necessarily so identified with being conservative. They're just identified with values. Mm-hmm. And it went against some of the values of, like, this is a value of justice. And so I would love to hear your thoughts, because there's been some interesting recent developments as this thing has kind of ebbed and flowed. So where are we at right now with this whole Epstein saga?
Yeah. So I think first, just to go back in history a little bit, and we should even define what terms mean here, because people are using the term Epstein client list and Epstein files interchangeably, and they're not the same thing. So Jeffrey Epstein, a known, molester and pedophile, was put in prison. And I think it was in 2019 that he was convicted and put in prison. And when he was put in prison, there were a bunch of theories. One of the theories was that there's a literal list of everyone that he trafficked minors and women to that exists. And he's holding on to it for blackmailing purposes or something like that. That was always a rumor. It was never established that there's a literal list of everyone who Epstein ever dealt with. The Epstein files is a broader body of information, court documents, evidence that the Department of Justice found to prosecute Epstein and anyone else involved in that matter. There are only two people who were ever actually prosecuted: Epstein and his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. So that's what happened in 2019. Fast forward to 2024, last year. Why did the Epstein files even come up? So Epstein had already been in jail for years, and then he died in jail. We don't know if he killed himself or someone killed him. Right? So that's still an open question. But people wanted answers, because to them, the whole Epstein situation represented the swamp that Trump said he would drain. Mm-hmm. It's billionaires and elites who are protected from any consequences for their own wrongdoing is representative of that, as well as protecting the most vulnerable members of our populations, women and children. And people felt like justice hadn't actually been served, because what we do know is that Epstein wasn't the only one abusing people. He had a whole ring of people. So people felt dissatisfied. It's like, well, we know a bunch of people participated in this, probably elites. Why did only two people go to prison?
Right.
In June of 2024, while on a Fox News interview, one of the anchors asked Trump, "Hey, would you release the Epstein files?" And he said, "Yeah, sure. Like, I'm not in it, so sure." Then he got asked again when he went on Lex Fridman podcast several months later whether he would release the Epstein files. And he said, "Yeah, sure." So now fast forward to him getting elected. I'm telling you this context because we need to understand, like, where it fit in Trump's priorities, because this wasn't something he was, like, campaigning on. This wasn't something he was, like, going to rallies and saying, we're going to release the Epstein files and there's a list and we're going to release a list. There was this collective expectation that was generated that a list existed, and that went unexamined, right? That was never proven that there was an actual list. So now Trump gets into office, and 38 days later, Pam Bondi, who's his attorney general, says, we're going to release the Epstein files. And she makes a big deal out of it, because this is me speculating. Politically, it's like an easy win. Like, yeah, we get to be the party who brings pedophiles to justice and gives the American people the transparency that they've been asking for. So this is something I assume Trump signed off on his attorney general doing, because she made a big deal out of it. In fact, such a big deal that there was a whole press conference where a bunch of primarily MAGA influencers came to the press conference. They had these white binders that said Epstein Files Phase 1. They were like brandishing these binders like, we got it, finally, truth and justice. And in my opinion, it was in poor taste. It's like, this didn't need to be, there shouldn't be a celebration around it. It's like, let's just make sure justice is served. So the files drop, or phase 1 of the file release. But remember, a bunch of files had already been made public over the years because they did a full investigation. And over time, as parts of the investigation ended or people were convicted, they did release some files to the public. I think what happened was Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, mismanaged expectations. Because in that 38-day period between Trump getting inaugurated and her releasing the additional files, she went on Fox News and a news anchor asked, "Hey, I heard we're getting the Epstein client list. Is that true?" And she said, "Yes, the files are on my desk." Note that he said client list. I speculate she was thinking files. She was making the same mistake that a lot of people are making, which is conflating the two. They're not the same thing, though. So other people were like, "Oh my God, there's a list and we're getting it." What she actually gave people was more files that didn't really prove anything. It was like flight logs and stuff like that. But she said, "Oh, sorry, but there's a phase 2 coming. Just wait for phase 2. It's going to be big." So she continues to play up expectations. Fast forward to, I think it was July. Phase 2 is supposed to drop. People are like, "Where is it? Where is it?" And then the Department of Justice releases a memo and says, "Hey, we reviewed all the evidence. There's no other evidence that's germane to release to the public. There's not going to be a phase 2 file release. We got to protect victims. And there's a bunch of child abuse material in there. We're not going to release that because it's not appropriate for the public to have." MAGA, so Trump's base, goes into an uproar. Because think of it from their perspective. They were expecting this whole time that there's a list that's going to get dropped, that's going to be clear, that people are going to be put in handcuffs and justice is going to be served. So they got disappointed once in, what was it? March, February, and then again in July. So now fast forward, Democrats were silent about all of this the entire time. They were not pushing for the file release. It was very much just a Trump campaign promise on the third page of his campaign promises. Once MAGA started revolting, then the Democrats, me speculating, but this is what I saw chronologically, they smelled blood in the water and they smelled an opportunity to stick it to their political opponent. So then they start asking questions, right? Questions that are meant to bring suspicion upon Trump. Well, why is he hiding the Epstein files? Yeah, we should get the file release. Meanwhile, none of them were pushing for the file. Not none of them, but very few of them were talking about the Epstein files at all.
Right.
That in combination with how Trump was speaking in response to his MAGA base being upset brought up energy even higher because Trump was very dismissive of people being upset.
Yeah, it's like he wasn't listening.
It's like he wasn't listening. And in fact, it was such a huge error because Trump is very good at understanding his base that people were like, "Are you actually hiding something?" It's like, right. Is this incompetence or malevolence? And the camps were split. I can see an explanation where it's just he literally misread the room. And then, but the degree to which he was resistant to his own movement made people more suspicious that he's hiding something. So then months go by and the MAGA base is not letting it go. And now the Democrats are adding additional fuel to the fire. And here's where there's a cognitive bias called motivated reasoning. It might be a logical fallacy. Motivated reasoning takes hold. And motivated reasoning is essentially when you argue to a conclusion that you've already formed and use evidence to fit your conclusion rather than find evidence and then find a conclusion, right? So people who hated Trump, they're like, yeah, of course he's a pedophile or covering up for pedophiles too. They don't even care. They're just like, I don't like Trump, I'll stick it to him. But there's a legitimate question of why is this guy being so resistant to releasing the remainder of the files, especially when he said he would? So in the last week, here's what started to happen. So there were a few Republican Congress people who were the faces of the pro-release the Epstein files movement. Two of them were Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie Taylor Greene was full on one of the faces of MAGA, really rode hard for Trump. She broke ranks with Trump and she said, "Look, this is not about party. This is about justice and women and children who are abused. These victims are saying that not all of the men who abused them have been brought to justice. I'm standing with them. Release the files." Trump retaliates against her politically. He says, "I revoke my endorsement of her. She's a traitor," really goes over the top. And it's, in my opinion, really bad look. It's look, this woman she's, in my opinion, just standing on principles.
Yeah.
But for him, my read on Trump is the worst case is that he's actually trying to hide something. I think the base case is that he just really likes what he perceives as disloyalty. And he had been arguing the whole time that this isn't even about the files. There's nothing additional in the files. Why are we even talking about this? Epstein's been dead for years. This is about the Democrats trying to stick it to me. And there's something to that because the Democrats have been trying to stick it to him for 10 years, right? Like that was a whole Russia collusion thing, which turned out to be a hoax. But the optics are terrible. Even if Trump has nothing to hide, the optics are absolutely terrible. Eventually, what happened in the last 72 hours is Trump went through an about face and he said, you know what? I'm going to tell the House Republicans, actually vote to release the files because I'm clean. There's nothing about me in the files. So the House passed a bill demanding the release of the files. The Senate passed a bill and President Trump signed it yesterday. So now we'll see. The Attorney General has 30 days to produce the files. Some people are like, well, how do we know the government's not just going to scrub the documents? Well, that was written. I mean, first of all, it's highly illegal to tamper with evidence that way or to do anything to the files. And they also wrote it specifically in the law that you can only redact names of victims and actual classified national security issues. So you can't arbitrarily revoke the name of some billionaire and say, oh, it's for national security. What has actually already started to happen is some people who were connected to Epstein are getting embarrassed by the connection to Epstein. So there's this guy, Larry Summers. He used to be a president of Harvard, and he was also in, I don't know if it was the Obama or Clinton administration as a Treasury Secretary. As a result of more of the files getting released over time, people found out that he was friends with Epstein and texting him and asking for advice on women, and it's a really bad look, right? Like Epstein, he was a manipulative guy, so he taught Larry Summers how to manipulate. And doesn't mean that Larry Summers is a pedophile, but it's just an awful guilt by association, awful look. So Larry Summers, he stepped down from the board of OpenAI. He is not teaching at Harvard next semester. So there's already some public shaming. But the question is, what do people now expect? In my opinion, we should not expect an Epstein client list. I personally think it's highly unlikely that one ever existed to begin with. And if one existed, well, first, let's evaluate a few different possibilities. The possibility that Trump is on such a list and would sign this into law, extremely low. I mean, it's not even about Trump being a good person. It's just, it massively goes against his self-interest. Yeah, why would you do that? So I rate that at sub 3% possibility. A higher percent possibility is there's some stuff in there that makes Trump look bad. So more like Larry Summers, maybe some salacious texts with Epstein, maybe some financial dealings that are gray areas or even strictly illegal. So that's higher likelihood. Let's say it's 10 to 15%, 20% even. The next possibility is that there would be political fallout because powerful people are named in those documents, and some of those powerful people are Trump allies, and he wants to protect them. I give that a higher possibility. Let's call that 30%. I'm not tracking my numbers, so it's not going to add up to 100, but you see what I'm saying, right? And then I think, honestly, the highest possibility is that he was resisting it because he sees this as a political tactic by the Democrats. He views it as something that's sucking oxygen out of the room, distracting from him keeping his base unified and galvanized to go accomplish his agenda. And I think what should happen is the files get released regardless of the political calculus. I think that's just the right thing to do. I also think there's something to what Trump is saying about this is a Democrat hoax. But it's not a Democrat hoax in the sense that there's nothing there. There's something in the files. It's probably not going to lead to any more criminal convictions, but at least it'll show who was friendly with Epstein. And I think that's good cultural reform. But regardless, we should just release the files for transparency's sake because trust is broken down between the politicians and the people.
Right.
And that's the real issue.
Right.
But we just keep in mind that the standard for a criminal conviction is beyond all reasonable doubt. And for very good reason. You don't put people in prison over just a suspicion. You need a lot of evidence. And if this was an elite billionaire pedophile trafficking ring with a bunch of heads of states, it's probably not a lot of paper trail. I know that's the least satisfying thing to hear because, we want to see people abuse their power go to prison.
And people think that this was a blackmail operation and that there's somebody that does have a list and they're using it to wield control. I mean, I think this is probably the most popular supposition that I think people have. And what's also very interesting that I've found is that people even in the conservative side, there's this interesting thing where it's Israel's fault. It all of a sudden, the idea that, the term cabal is actually a Jewish is actually a Jewish epithet. It's talking about Kabbalah. And so it's saying the cabal, this deep state, this thing that we don't know exactly what it is, but we have a sense that there's some other organized body that's actually pulling the strings like puppeteers in this. There's this kind of felt sense that this thing exists.
Yeah.
And then the conflation of that with the cabal, even using the word cabal, which implies that it's Jewish, and then implying that the Jews are behind all of this. That's been an interesting trend that's kind of come across, where you're getting a lot of people saying like, oh, this was Jewish, espionage and Secret Service, and this was all part of this plan, and that's why we're being sympathetic to Israel, and it's a strange place to be in, because it's almost become in vogue again to be actually legitimately fairly anti-Semitic and come to conclusions that there's a not zero chance that some of these, hypotheses are true. I'm not saying that there's a 0% chance that Israel had some part to do with this in some way, and they're executing control. I mean, that's the purpose of espionage. It's a game of leverage. So, but I think a lot of this is about, is there a game of leverage being played, and who's playing it?
Yeah. This is where we get into trying to think clearly about conspiracies, which is one of the hardest things to do. Because inherently, the thing with cover-ups and actual conspiracies is they're designed to be opaque. Like, we wouldn't actually know what's going on. And when people don't know what's going on, they tend to theorize about what's going on, and they don't think of things in terms of probabilities. It's just like, no, it's definitely Israel, or it's definitely not.
Yeah.
When, as you said, it's like a non-zero possibility. It's lower than other possibilities, but it's non-zero, and we should investigate it. But it shouldn't be based on our feelings. It shouldn't be based on our felt sense. It should be based on objective evidence. We have to have objective evidence for everything. So with the whole, let me try to steelman the Israel was involved with Epstein thing just for a second. I don't understand the argument very well, so I'm not going to do this perfectly. But the idea is that Epstein had friendships / connections with at least one former prime minister of Israel, and had ties as a financier and with contacts in the Middle East. And Israeli intelligence is the most sophisticated intelligence in the world, next to the CIA. And at least in theory, they would be capable of pulling off an operation like this. So it's not that there's a smoking gun, it's just a plausible theory in some people's minds. Now, plausibility does not mean happening in actuality, but a lot of people are it's like the more that people protest, the more that people feel justified in their suspicion. And the tough thing here is that this is a joint problem. Like, it's important for individuals to hold a really high standard of thinking, and we need to look for objective evidence for everything. But part of the problem is there's been so much lying by politicians that people are just like, you know what? I'm just going to be skeptical by default. So if I'm not getting the full story, I'm going to make a story, and I'm going to become attached to it. And I don't think it would be fair to call all of it anti-Semitism. Some of it absolutely is, to be clear. And some of it is conflating the nation of Israel, or not even nation, the government of Israel. And then you can even get more precise, like a faction of the government of Israel with Jews in general, which is not fair. It's not fair. Like, it would be like conflating all Muslims with the Islamic Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood. It's not fair, right? Like, we have millions of Muslims who live here peacefully in the United States. They don't all want Sharia law in the country. Yes, are there a lot of Muslims who do want Sharia law? Yeah, and those people are not compatible with American values, because Sharia law is literally unification of church and state. We can't do that here.
Right.
But the problem is people don't, they don't have I don't want to say this in a rude way. They don't have skepticism of their own skepticism a lot of the time. And they're like, well, this is the theory that feels right, so I'm going to say it's right until proven otherwise. And there's almost this asymmetric standard of evidence where to prove the mainstream narrative is true, you need a very, very high level of evidence. But to prove the non-mainstream or contrarian narrative is true, you just need a bunch of associations. You don't actually need solid evidence. And that's not rigorous.
Yeah.
Right? That's not rigorous. And we've gotten to a place in society where it's not enough for something to be, or you need to just prove things in the court of public opinion rather than the actual court. So if like a charismatic, confident commentator gave you a really compelling sounding argument for why they think it's, Israel or the Jews or whatever, people will take that one possibility, but they won't compare it against other possibilities and say, okay, well, which one is more or less likely? So are we talking about 10% likelihood, 90% likelihood? What are we actually talking about?
Right.
So I think a mistake would be, and this is a mistake from the opposite side, is to dismiss people as anti-Semites. Because what happens is when people feel dismissed, they just resist. Mm-hmm. They just double down. It's like, oh yeah, well now you're calling me a name. Now because you're protesting so much, I think there's something definitely there. And it's like kind of a breakdown of communication. This is why it's so important to not retaliate even when someone's attacking you. Because a lot of people, they just respond to aggression with more aggression, but that never actually brought peace. But but at the end of the day, like we can't just go off feelings. Like you gotta have objective evidence. And I think the healthy thing about this whole Epstein file situation is that it was a bipartisan vote to release the Epstein files. It was like 427-1. It was like one person dissenting. I think that's actually great. Mm-hmm. Like we want to see everyone to be united. Like, yeah, let's release the files. And it's not even just about the Epstein thing. It's about decades and decades of lying and government cover-ups. And I wish we could be there is a risk when you release the files, people's reputations are going to be damaged who didn't actually do something bad besides knowing Epstein. That's going to happen. And that's the price that we need to pay to restore public trust again. And I think that releasing these files is just about restoring public trust. But do I think it's going to prove anything? Is it going to prove the Israeli intelligence theory? Is it going to show that, some of these names like Reid Hoffman, Bill Gates, and Larry Summers actually participate in illicit activity? I think the chances are really low, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you thinking through this carefully and with the precision that you think through everything, and also the humility to acknowledge when there's areas that are actually you haven't actually taken the patience. Mm. I think patience and clear thinking are also, they're bedfellows. Yeah. And you have to be patient to actually understand things. And I've certainly made that mistake before, not quite being patient enough before I go out and say something that feels right. Mm-hmm. And there's something to be said for the rigor and patience that's required to actually speak carefully on these issues. And you demonstrate that over and over. There's one other hotbed issue that I think, we mentioned in a cursory way that was, I think, really important to a lot of people. And this was the idea that there was a transgender agenda at play, and then the confusion around gender in general, and then also the opening up the doors to gender affirming policies for teens in their developmental. And clearly, I mean, this is not like a supposition to say that there's a lot of confusing things happening for teens. So people were like, yo, this is not a time where we should be allowing them the opportunity to make life-changing decisions in their most confused and socially pressurized years. And I think people saw that, and that was another part of this kind of conservative movement that took place. So how do you diagnose what happened, and then kind of where we are, what mistakes were made, what good things have happened?
Yeah. So again, always important, because I part of the reason I voted for Trump was because I thought this whole gender ideology stuff was going way too far. But let's just represent as charitably as possible why proponents of transgenderism and gender ideology were pushing it. As you just acknowledged, puberty, adolescence is a very confusing period in people's lives. And it's only gotten more confusing with the advent of, again, social media. And, you have a whole generation of young boys who have been told that men are evil and that masculinity is bad. You have a whole generation of young girls who have been told you're not pretty enough, you need to get a BBL, and you need to get a nose job, and you need to get a boob job until anyone will love you. And this is constantly being pumped into people's phones. And meanwhile, they have COVID, so they don't even get to go to school. They don't socialize properly. And increasingly, people are stuck on their screens. This is an environment where there's going to be a lot of confusion. And the way that a lot of these kids are going to translate that confusion is something's wrong with me. I was born in the wrong body, which is just tragic. Just in principle, I think everyone can agree, like, we don't want any child to think that there's something wrong with them, that they were born damaged or insufficient and they need some sort of surgery or hormone replacement to fix them. Like, and then I think those are divergence in how different camps view the solution to the problem. Some people view this as something that can be solved with science because gender dysphoria is actually a mismatch between people's perception of them and their body. So, of course, if we just change their body, then their perception will be matched. That's the pro-gender ideology camp. And they would look at this as, hey, well, you know, if a child says that they were born in the wrong body, that's their truth and we should listen to them. And to not listen to them would be not compassionate. It's not empathetic. And they would say that gender itself is a social construct, right? So what does man, woman mean anyway? And again, being charitable to the strongest argument, they weren't even disputing whether there's biological sex. Similar to, I talked about how race is a social construct. Gender is literally a social construct that was invented by a man named John Money. Like, so the idea is like, well, you kind of see it in the spiritual community. There's masculine and feminine. So to say that someone is a man is actually heteronormative and it's putting them in a box. And certainly we shouldn't want people to feel like they're in a box. I mean, you can have a penis or a vagina, but that just means you have a penis or vagina. You can go live your life in a variety of ways. So I think the whole idea of gender ideology is to free people from feeling the need to be in this box that we had for so long. I think it went too far because what also happened is we started to affirm children's confusion was not because they were confused, but because something's wrong with them. And irrespective of the whole gender ideology stuff, I don't think that's a way that you make high agency, empowered human beings. You don't tell someone, yeah, something is wrong with you. You tell someone, hey, this is who you are, and you can love yourself and have an amazing life with a God, or maybe I don't believe in God, but with the body that you have, with the mind that you have, with the resources that you have, instead of, no, something needs to actually be fixed in you. And these ideas made their way into our educational system. And our educational system is teaching kids that their feelings are truth, that objectivity itself is oppressive. And it's also teaching people this narrative of oppressed oppressor. So kids are viewing resistance or like just taking a stand, a principled stand against a lot of this confusion as hateful. It's like, no, it's just a different way of approaching child rearing. Like maybe I want to tell a child, no, you're not born in the wrong body. Like you are a male, you are a female, and that doesn't have to mean a bunch of other things about your life, but it does mean that this is the body you have. Like how do we get you to love the body that you have instead of thinking that you need a new one? So a whole bunch of things got conflated, and you know that. Look, let me just like really steal a man list. Let's say that some people genuinely are born in the wrong body. Let's say that some people, just like people are born without an arm or they're born with some sort of congenital disorder, some people, there's genuine, like, the wires got crossed somewhere and they're just born in the wrong body. Well, why is it that the number of people identifying as transgender has skyrocketed? It's recently actually started to dip since basically a year ago, since Trump got elected. But why did it skyrocket over time? I would posit, not someone who's a gender researcher, but I would posit it's because of the influence of social media and norms and memes and ideas, not because of some genuine, authentic sense that, oh, I have a disorder. And yeah, it's people identifying as even gay and lesbian and queer is highly susceptible to where society is currently at. Like you can look at a graph, it's not consistent. So is it possible that there's a population of children who identify as transgender, who are identifying as transgender because they're genuinely born in the wrong body and now it's just becoming more socially acceptable? Okay, let's grant that just for the sake of argument. But what percentage of the population are we actually talking? Is it 0.1% or 1% or 10%? Why is it fluctuating so much depending on who's in office and what's socially acceptable?
Right.
So yeah,
And why are tattoos illegal for anybody under 18, but gender-affirming care that changes your life in a much more irrevocable way than a bad tattoo?
Yeah.
That's I think another one of the big challenges is like Sure. All right. Hold out, work on the practices to love yourself. And I personally believe that it either went too far or it didn't go far enough. And but what I mean by didn't go far enough is we started putting genders we said, all right, well, we're in a box. So let's create a couple more boxes. But actually, everybody's a unique gender. We all have a unique blend of masculine and feminine and, soul-centric neutral or whatever. Like there's a unique combination, just like we're a unique makeup of DNA and genetics. There's nuance in all of it. So everybody is a one of one.
Yeah.
Actually, so maybe we just go back to, we can just call each other by our names and use the general categories that are common sense, like axioms, like, oh, you're a male. You have a unique gender, as all males do, as all females do. There's uniqueness that actually it doesn't even work to have 65 pronouns. We need actually 8 billion because everybody's fucking unique. So it's either too far or not far enough. Yeah. But either way, it leads to the same idea, which is love yourself uniquely for who you uniquely are.
Yeah, and just like, again, I'm Black, but I'm not. It's not like a big deal. It's like if you're a woman who wants to look like a man or a man who wants to look like a woman, cool. It's not a big deal though. Like, do we need to make up a whole ideology around it? And that's part of the problem. I had a really interesting conversation. I actually had a public conversation with someone who underwent even the pronouns and stuff. It's very confusing, but looks like a woman. They look like a woman. And I asked them, how do you view this whole trans thing? And what they said to me is, I actually don't like a lot of this trans ideology, this social movement, because they were old school. They were like, look, I know I'm a biological male. I just want to look like a woman. Mm-hmm. So their mindset was, I need to look like a woman as much as possible, so people just call me she. That's all I want. I don't want to be in a pride parade. I don't want to tell people what their words are supposed to be and tell people they're bad if they don't use the right words. I want to just look like a woman. Mm. And I was like, that's actually pretty reasonable. Sure. It's cool if you want to dress.
You do you.
You do you. But this thing where we're speech policing and thought policing, and we're saying, if you tripped over the pronouns and you called me a he when I'm really a she, then you're a bigot and you're hateful. No, that's actually using force rather than harmony and persuasion. Mm-hmm. And I think there's many people, just we shouldn't be calling everyone who has genuine concerns about the actions of certain factions of the Israeli government anti-Semitic. We shouldn't be calling everyone who has genuine concerns about the transgender movement and think that modifying the hormones of kids and potentially castrating them is a good thing, a transphobe. Why are we calling everyone these names? We're just going to these extremes. Mm-hmm. So, look, I think this is one of the things, again, gender is a social construct. I don't think it's a particularly useful one. But it is a social construct. Sex is not. And our language has been developed around the idea of biological sex. For millennia, he referred to a biological male. She referred to a biological female. Woman referred to an adult human female. Man referred to an adult human male. And we have language so that we can coordinate. But when we say, no, certain words, if you say that you're hateful, you're not respecting my identity, we break down the ability to coordinate. And if you haven't noticed, every time, reliably, and I know this because I live in LA, and we just experienced it right now, every time you have to think about the pronouns, it's a waste of time. It's literally time that we're spending, cognitive bandwidth that we're spending talking about the right pronouns when we could be, colonizing the galaxy. Mm-hmm. And doing things that are actually productive and cool. I don't know, man. I don't want to spend my limited time on this planet talking about my color and my genitals. I don't think that's fun to anyone.
Yeah. And
it's just, I don't think it's a good use of time. And just like I said, that racial ideology is a degenerative concept. I don't mean that judgmentally. It's it literally, it breaks things down. It doesn't build things up. I think gender ideology is the same.
Yeah. So, I mean, really what you're standing for, and I tend to agree with pretty much everything you've said, and even the subtle corrections in the things that I've said that you've said. I'm like, yeah, fucking fair. Cool. I'm sharpening my own sword of discernment and clarity and utilization of language as we interact. Yeah. So it's a feeling, and it seems like the overarching ideas are, finding the nuance that allows you to see the middle path, clearing up your cognitive biases, distortions, and becoming familiar with this. I mean, the way to think should be really the focus of education.
Yes.
Rather than what you actually know. It's how do you arrive at what you know.
Yes.
Like that needs to be the most important thing. Not can you memorize the date and place and the people who signed the Treaty of Versailles. It doesn't matter. You can fucking Google that shit. You can put it in Grok. Whatever you want to do, you'll figure that out. How do you think about things?
Yes.
How are you aware of yourself enough that you can actually speak clearly about things? What are our inherent susceptibilities?
Yes.
Where are we susceptible to tribalist thinking? Where are we susceptible to self-serving bias? Where are we susceptible to motivational reasoning? Where are we, and just have that kind of like, it's like the humility that allows us to walk a middle path and actually bring these poles together and unite them. Because the more we create different camps of race, of gender, of all this, the more separate we feel from everybody else.
Exactly. Love that you said that. And I do think that's actually perhaps the highest lever we can pull, education. Our education system is not teaching people to think for themselves. It's indoctrination, not education. And I'm going to get on my little high horse for a second here.
Go for it.
Because in the spiritual community, people talk a lot about my truth, your truth. And truth is what exists in reality. That's what truth is. It's not personal. It's not subjective. It exists in reality. So I have my experience of reality. You have your experience of reality, but I don't have my truth. You don't have your truth. There's truth and there's our experience of the truth. Mm-hmm. So of course, I'm the only one inhabiting my brain. So only I get to see what thoughts I'm having, but these thoughts are occurring in reality. I'm just the only one who can see them. It's not my reality. Reality is collective. It's shared. I think this is really important, actually, because when we say your truth, my truth, it's kind of like a semantic sleight of hand. And it's actually a way of avoiding conflicting conversations that help us get to the truth. Mm-hmm. It's almost like if I say it's my truth, then people are like, well, I don't want to offend them. I don't want to take away their truth. If you say it's your truth, it's like, well, I don't want to be mean. I don't want to like contradict their truth. When in fact, what we're really wanting to do, and I think this is coming from a good place, we don't want to unnecessarily hurt each other. We don't want to unnecessarily offend each other. But when we treat truth like it's subjective, when in fact it's objective, we have subjective experiences of it, but it's objective. It exists independent of us. What happens is we cease to have conversations where we can get to the truth. Mm-hmm. And the only way we can get to the truth, especially the bigger truth, is together. Like we need each other because I'm just a subject. You're just a subject. We need to have things that move beyond our subjective experience and unify us. And this is what philosophy is supposed to be, or is. Like when we go back to
love of wisdom.
Yeah. And like we go back to like Aristotle and Socrates and Plato and like, the founders of a classical philosophy, they developed systems to help us reason through things in an objective way. But unfortunately, instead of people being taught that objectivity is even a thing, they're taught, no, well, it's just how you feel. How you feel is the indication of truth. And it's not. Mm-hmm. Right? I think we feel in response to truth a lot of the time. Like, I think, yes, people should feel passionate when there's like children being abused, for example. Like, of course, that's a natural human response, but we don't want to conflate emotion with truth itself. And that's why, like, a lot of this it just comes down to language. And when we change language, like, going back to like the man-woman thing, when we change language, we change our perception of reality itself. So we want to be very careful with the terms that we introduce into the culture. And that's why I personally, it's a big pet peeve, honestly, when people are like, your truth, my truth. And I've done it before too. Like I lived in Topanga, so spiritual communities like ayahuasca and bufo and boga and everyone's in the ceremony and to love each other. It's, I love you, everything's perfect.
Yeah.
But I think what's also happened is, and I think you'll appreciate this, if we actually look at this from a lens of like masculinity and femininity, I think of femininity as essentially very yes. It's very like accepting and more. Masculinity is kind of like the not so fun job of being like, no, actually, this is the boundary. It's this and it's not that. Mm-hmm. And we become pretty hostile to masculinity in this culture. And we often talk about toxic masculinity. We don't talk about toxic femininity. we don't need to get into the conversation about which one is more present, but one doesn't exist without the other. So we've demonized even taking a masculine stance and saying, no, there's principles, there's objective reality. And we know when we actually have truth, when things are working in objective reality. Right? I think the reason why, as much as people want to hate on America, the reason why America is the most powerful country on earth, or at least hopefully for a few more years, is because we have a culture that is better at solving physical world problems. We have a culture that is more successful at working with physical reality to produce the things that we want. That's what culture is. It's just software. Like, it's not about people, better or worse people. It's just an algorithm that we're running that's really effective. But people have been taught that there's no such thing as like better or worse thinking. Like, whatever you think you're entitled to think it. You're entitled to think it. It doesn't make it correct. Okay? It's okay to be incorrect. I'm incorrect all the time.
For sure.
Right? Like, and we should like have fun with being correct and like laugh at ourselves and like, okay, cool. Like, what do you think? And obviously I'm sitting on a podcast and I'm like, we're having this conversation. It's just you and me and just sharing opinions. But like, I love when I'm proven wrong because I get to learn something new. And if I can learn something new, I'm more powerful in my experience. I get more power over reality to shape it in a way that is fun for me.
It's when curiosity becomes a higher value, and curiosity, transformation, and growth becomes a higher value than being right. Yeah. Right? Like you got to be excited about being wrong, because that means there's a whole area that is actually you've improved in.
Yeah.
And then when you're actually, your telos is improvement and like actually understanding something more, and you have a curious, ideology towards it rather than a clear, like, I know this. I mean, we had so many people. I did this podcast with, my beloved wife, Ilana's here, and Alana was here, and Rebbe Gaffney was here. There were so many people who were absolutely so certain of so many things about our relationship as it is and as it will be. Yeah. And then it's like, whoa, you really think you're inside all of our minds? You really think you haven't talked to anybody who actually knows us? You haven't talked to us? You listen to one podcast and you know that this won't work. This is bad. You don't know shit, honestly.
Yeah.
And it's like, I like mad love and also, boundary. Like, we're going to live our fucking life, and we're going to live our life the way that we want, with as much love and as much care. And we're going to do that. And we're going to build our family the way we want to build our family. And we'll see, maybe you'll be right. Maybe this will devolve into fucking chaos and everybody will hate each other. And you'll be see, I told you so. But maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe 40 years from now, we'll be all fucking gray and we'll be doing a podcast, and, there'll be little kids running around, and they'll be like, man, it was fucking great.
Yeah.
You have to, like, all y'all out there, you have to at least hold that as possible. Otherwise, you're not thinking clearly.
Yeah. And we everyone else gets to watch. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, you don't want to go through that. Cool. You don't have to. You can watch someone on the internet do it. And you get to live vicariously if you don't want to live it directly. But yeah, I agree. Curiosity, that would solve so much of this. It's strange to me. People are like, oh, the media is so biased and they're lying, but not my media. It's like, why do we think of ourselves as the exception? And we all, like, again, I think it was Richard Feynman, the physicist, who said, the first rule is you must not allow yourself to be fooled, and you're the easiest person to fool. Right. And it's true. And you're the easiest person for you to fool, especially. Yeah. But I think I've been thinking a lot about the Bible, and not even the Bible, but Jesus specifically, and like the example that he set. And one of the things that he said that I think is like, it really has been reverberating for me is, why do you protest the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye while missing the plank in your own? And it's like, why are we so quick to judge others while not seeing what we're doing? And, his example, the speck of sawdust is smaller than the plank. It's not even about comparing. Like, maybe someone really is doing more evil than you, but have you purified yourself?
Right.
And as you purify yourself, you'll be able to naturally embody yourself in a way that will help purify others. You don't need to try, right? People will be inspired by your example. But instead, what people are doing is they're just very self-righteous, very sure. And I look around, I'm like, how are you guys so sure? Everything I said, I'm going to think about over and over as this podcast. Like, did I say the right thing? Did I say it the right way? Was someone offended? Could I have said that more clearly? I'm going to think about it endlessly. Sure. And I think that's just, it's just how healthy, and that's how we all can grow. But we've become very self-righteous, all of us collectively. And I remember my grandma, I visited Ghana a few years ago for my grandma's 90th birthday. And that was the last time I saw her. And one of the last things she told me is, make sure to keep yourself low, keep yourself humble, or you will be humbled. And I think that was the most practical advice she could have gave me, because it's not even about being humble as a virtue. It's like, it actually protects you from embarrassing yourself and hurting yourself more. So if we just all were very comfortable with, I don't know, like everything I said, I don't actually know, I'm just trying.
Yeah.
And I'm helping contribute a way of thinking that hopefully helps us all get to the truth, I think we'd all be a lot better off.
For sure. And let me show my math. Let me show how I arrived to it. And so that way, it's not just arguing about the conclusion based on your emotional feeling about the conclusion. Let's go argue this premise by this premise by this premise by this premise, and then let's see if the logic actually holds.
Yeah.
One of my favorite classes in college, I was a philosophy major, was symbolic logic. And it took logical arguments and reduced them to equations.
Nice.
And so actually we were able to do logic as math. And that was my math credit that I was able to do through the philosophy department. And it was fucking incredible.
Yeah.
And I actually had my professor on here. We got to reconnect and go through it. But I remember just the utter joy in being able to actually follow logic to its conclusions and really understand where all of the fallacies and where all the problems are.
I'm getting so excited right now because that explains this meeting. I studied philosophy at Harvard. I majored in philosophy. I wasn't a very diligent student. That's a whole other story. But I do remember this one class I took. It was an intro to logic class. And I remember it not even, I don't even know if I even finished the class, but I remember it was like a huge awakening. I was like, wait a second, logic is a thing.
Yeah.
Like it's actually a system. You can do logic. It's not just when people are like, be logical, it's not like be smart or whatever. There's actually a structured way to go through an argument and make a quality argument that can work and be useful in the real world.
Right.
And yeah, I don't think a lot of people have even had exposure to that.
Right.
And that's one of the things that we need to be teaching people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, this was too fun.
Yeah.
I appreciate this. And it seems like a long time coming, and there's like countless other issues outside of, the political sphere that I'm sure that we can talk about. And so we'll do this again some other time. I'm sure there'll be some more crazy shit going on in the world and new things that are happening, but then maybe we can delve into some of the other aspects of our shared history. And I think we're going to find that there's a lot in common. We've arrived at similar places through vastly different paths. So It's been really beautiful, man. There was one thing I want to highlight to people. You mentioned in one of your posts, there's like a news service app that you can get. What was it called? Ground News. Ground News.
Yeah.
That's pretty fucking cool. I think a lot of people should get that because it shows both sides of the argument and it has kind of like a probability lever.
Yeah.
And I don't know what your involvement is with them.
They're one of my sponsors.
One of your sponsors? Just share that for 1 second as just like an actionable way that people can get information, because I thought that was actually like a very practical, valuable thing. Like
Yes. Yeah. So in my own research process, I use two things a lot: Ground News and AI. And I'll talk about AI in a moment if we want to. Ground News is a service that is a news aggregator that basically scrubs the internet, and for any given story shows you how the different sides are reporting it, or the full political spectrum. So let's say you want to know about the Epstein files. It'll have a story about the Epstein files. It'll give you an AI summary, trying to be as neutral as possible, saying what people are saying about the Epstein files, like where do the sides agree? And then it'll show you where they disagree or what their bias is. And it's just like a really good way of getting a quick, easy check on what's going on and what's the high level summary. So yeah, that's an app. They have a free version. There's also a paid version if you want some of the more advanced
features. And it's called
features.
Ground News. So just search Ground News in your app store.
Yep. Yeah. And I think I can do this, but I have a special link.
/Kaizen.
Yeah. Ground.news/Kaizen. So I should tell them maybe an affiliate link, but that's just my private link. So I don't get anything out of that one, but it's some goodwill from my sponsor. They treated me really well. They were actually my first sponsor.
It seems like a really good service.
It's a great service.
I'm not like doing this because I want to but it's a good fucking service. I think it's really helpful for society.
It is. And I think one of the most valuable things, like one of the things that we did a lot in this conversation is steel man. And you described well what straw manning versus steel manning is. merely being exposed to a quality version of the argument of people that you disagree with is itself enlightening.
For sure.
Like the moment you're like, oh, that doesn't actually sound crazy. I disagree, but it doesn't sound crazy. That already helps you think more clearly and everyone else get along more. I think that's one of the things that Ground News does really well. And I'll also say that to leave us on an inspiring note here, this is the most informed and most powerful. This is a period in time where you can be more informed and more powerful than ever. Like all the work that I do, you see that I bring the receipts and I show my math. I'm able to do that because of AI and Ground News. Like I will literally, the limit is just my curiosity.
Yeah.
And how long I'm willing to like sit, not just take the answer from AI at face value, but really dig. I'm always talking to my AI, asking questions as I think about stuff, not to get the answer, but to give me information to work with. And then I reason through it myself. And if you just learn to ask AI questions that show genuine curiosity and you're willing to be proven wrong, very simple question is, hey, what's the best argument against this and for it? Or, hey, Trump did this thing. What are the best arguments for and against it? That itself is so freeing, man. And yeah, it didn't used to be the case like 10 years ago that you could just instantly get a summary of a 500-page bill in a few seconds. You can do that now. You can just directly, you don't even need the media. You can directly go to the primary source documents. And yeah, AI is not perfect, but I don't think
it's fucking cool though. Like I have to say, everybody's like, there's a lot of fear around AI and I understand, and there's some existential risk questions and et cetera, and fucking bad robots, whatever you want to do. But it's fucking cool. Dude. Like I heard of the concept of, I'm just going to share one quick story. I heard of the concept of abraxas like 3 days ago. And abraxas is an old Gnostic idea about a God that is the combination of opposites. It's the life-giving sun and the soul-sucking void. It's the beauty and the horror. It's the deity that holds the balance of everything. And it's called abraxas. I'd never heard that before. I've been on the Abraxas Burning Man car, but I just thought that was the name of their fucking dragon that rolled around the playa. And then I just went deep and I started asking questions, and I saw where Jung talked about it in Sermon 3, and I was like blown away by the poetry and prose of Jung talking about this. And then the 2nd century text where it was discovered that, the Gnostics were first talking about it, and then where it's gone. And that, maybe I would have found some weird Google searched articles that had some person's bias, but just interacting for like an hour and a half and asking curious questions and then forming things, I was like, God, this is one of the coolest times to be alive, where we can really explore ideas. And then it just felt like there was a whole dark quadrant of my mind that never heard this term, despite years searching, esoteric wisdom, et cetera. And then all of a sudden I could get in and find all of these different things, and it could just blossom in this empty garden of ignorance. Just all of a sudden had flowers, and all of a sudden, and then there was weeds that I had to pick. And then there was this whole thing that I was able to do. And AI was a big part of that tool. And like, it's a potent tool. It doesn't come without risks, but it can come with great rewards. I have to say that.
Totally agree. I think people don't realize how dope being human is. It's like how tremendous our intelligence is, our capacity to grow. And I think if we just like felt more agency, we wouldn't be so scared. But yeah, just use the tool and don't let it use you.
Yeah. Yeah, don't make it your girlfriend.
Yeah,
like, relax.
That's not a good idea.
Get a real girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever you want.
Whatever you need, just a real human.
Like real people. Real people are awesome.
Exactly.
They're more awesome than AI.
Exactly, man.
And, AI is fucking awesome.
Yeah, I agree.
Totally. All right. My brother, this was fucking epic. You're at That's Kaizen. You got a dope Substack too, where you put these things that you explain so clearly verbally into the written word. Where else can people look for you? You're gonna start a podcast? You're gonna do anything else like that?
I don't know. I mean, probably a talk show. I think I like talking too much to have guests, so I like hearing myself.
Yeah, let's go, man.
Yeah, but for sure next year I want to start doing more in-person events, campuses especially.
Yeah, so you're gonna maybe campuses. Like come into that little bit of that Charlie Kirk, emptiness that was left from people actually having conversation.
Yeah.
Because you seem like someone who's not afraid. Like if someone comes with an argument, you'll listen to their argument and then provide your argument in a fair and a fucking incredible way.
Yeah. I mean, I'm afraid, but I like to think I have courage, so it's always scary, and I would, of course, I have my own style of doing things. I wouldn't do it the way that Charlie did, but
Sure.
I think the service of let's have conversations at the universities where we're supposed to be exchanging ideas is really important to carry on that mission. And yeah, more of that. So in terms of online, just Google me, you'll find me, but that's where I want to be next.
Blessings on your courage, brother.
Thank you.
Like, it fucking matters, like we'll have families soon, and these families are going to grow up in a world, and that world, like, the world needs help, and I asked Bobby Kennedy in my first interview, I said, are you afraid of the fate of your uncle and your dad? And he looked at me, he goes, there are worse things than death. So blessings to your courage now and your courage in the future. And you can always count me as an ally to be there.
Thank you, man.
For sure, brother.
I received that, bro.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. I almost made it through a podcast without crying, but I kept my streak alive. So here we go. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for tuning into this video. Make sure you hit subscribe. Follow me at Aubrey Marcus. Check out the Aubrey Marcus podcast, available everywhere. And leave a comment. Let me know if this video resonated or what else you would like to hear from me in the future. Thank you so much.